What is going on, people? Thank you so much for tuning in to the MMA Podcast. We got a ton to break down. Haven't done a show since our live podcast from Vegas, so we got to talk a little bit about UFC 189, even though it was a week and a half ago. A whole lot to break down from that card, including Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald in what I think is my favorite fight of all time. That fight was fucking fantastic. Got the Tiger Knee with Jeremy Stephens, Conor McGregor defeating Chad Mendes, a few cards past that, and two cards in our future, both the UFC on Fox card this Saturday and UFC 190. A ton to talk about. I'm ready to break it down. Let's do it, people.
You're listening to the MMA Podcast.
Thank you so much, Lenny Hart. It is the MMA Podcast number 132. Been a very wild month and a half for the podcast, and yours truly was in Florida for a wedding, went to Vegas. Now I've been packing up, getting ready to move cross country. So once again, we do apologize that we haven't been able to do a show every week like we have almost, for 3 years now, since June 2012. We've been pretty reliable as far as doing a show each week, even though the day has jumped around a little bit from month to month. But we plan on August, once we get the new studio set up in Florida, bringing you once again regular shows and all that. Have a few guests set up. Actually messaged Nate Corey today and asked if we could get him back on sometime in August. Was one of our first guests. Had him on back in 2012, and a lot has changed since then. Corey has turned into one of the biggest voices, sort of, I don't want to say against the UFC, because I think that sort of paints a one-sided picture, but for, I don't know, fighter rights, a fighter's union. There's been a lot of pushback with the Reebok deal, with Stitch recently getting fired. We'll touch on that a little bit later on in the show, but it'll be very neat to have Nate back on. Nate, I think when we had him on back in 2012, was one of the I think the longest interview I've ever done. We had him on, I think, for about 90 minutes. And he talked about all sorts of stuff, from not getting money from his own likeness with old UFC events, to his crazy upbringing as a Jehovah's Witness, being sort of excommunicated from his family, and the bizarre aspect of his life that all of his friends and people he talks to day to day, he met after he was 18, because that's a wild life being a Jehovah's Witness and leaving. They just shun you, even family. It's a wild story. So if you're bored and feel like going back, I know it's on our YouTube page. It might be on our iTunes as well. YouTube doesn't have a maximum capacity of what we can store, so we have everything on the YouTube, but we do have a maximum on the iTunes. But I think I've left that up. Links for both our YouTube and iTunes pages can be found on the MMApodcast.com. Just click the tabs on the top. But enough about the show and all that. We've got a very good friend of the show. He's done 2 Glory events, repping the podcast, and live tweeted from Southern Cali. He was in Vegas with us this past weekend. Didn't get in town early enough for us to do the podcast with him. That was only myself and Jay Jeans. But he is joining us. He did go to the Grand Canyon with Jay and I. It is P Money, a.k.a. Sweet Pappy Jones on Twitter. Pat, what's going on, brother?
Hey, just chilling, Big Jake. hanging out down here in Southern California. It has been a big month and a half. Did the Glory event, like you alluded to, down in San Diego in May. That was a big fight, big night, tournament action there. Fantastic action as always. And yeah, we did the Vegas thing, did the Arizona thing for the Grand Canyon. Back in SoCal, Jake, I know you're over there making your moves. We're just doing big things, international pimping, and it's been a fantastic week. We had that 4-event week, starting with UFC 189, and then with the tough finale, and then UFC fight nights on Wednesday and the subsequent Saturday. It's just been a wild time for MMA, and the action's not letting up, as you alluded to. We've got the event this coming Saturday as well as next Saturday. So things are just going fantastic personally. Tons of big news as well, as you had mentioned. Not just the events, we got lots of news, lots of big things happening in the world of MMA overall.
Fedor.
So
Yeah.
Fedor, IVs. I mean, friggin', what do you want to talk about? I mean, we got so much, Jake.
A ton of shit, yeah.
Oh, man, you know what? I got to say, though, real quick, popping off the breaking news today, talking about Drake not writing his own rhymes, son. I'll tell you what, all I know, you go listen to YG, Who Do You Love? You go listen to that single, and you listen to Drake's verse. Then you go listen to Rappin' Fote, The Players Club. I'm sorry, this is probably well-known information right now. I mean, at least it should be if it's not already, but Drake's verse on Who Do You Love is straight up Rappin' Fote. I'm sure that's not news to anybody, but I'm just saying. I mean, you got that right there out in the open. I'm not saying.
You got rap
but,
beef on the podcast.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying that's right there. Damn. So take that for what it's worth.
Take that for what it's worth. Put it in your pipe and smoke it. Yeah, we've got a ton to break down. So without any further ado, let's get straight into it. UFC 189, very well could have been the best card the UFC has ever made. Not just from the stacked fights, top to bottom, but all the last 6 fights were finishes, and we're going to talk about those 6 fights. Just, I would like to break every fight down just because we have a lot to get to tonight, and I don't know if I want to do a 2-hour marathon because your boys got boxes to pack. I got the moving truck reserved for 5 or 6 days. So, we'll do an average show, but these 2 or 3 hour marathons, we've done them in the past, and I don't know if tonight is the night for that. Let's start off with the first 3 finishes, and then we'll break the next 3 down one by one. But I do want to group up the Matt Brown, Thomas Almeida, and Gunnar Nelson wins. Man, all of these were fun ass fights. I mean, all 6 of these fights were worth watching. Really, if I have a card now that I want to show a friend who's not really familiar with the UFC, MMA, this is probably the card I'm going to pop on. Matt Brown, Tim Means. I maybe didn't give Means enough credit. I thought Matt Brown was going to completely steamroll him, but Tim Means took it to Matt Brown and rocked him a few times. Had me very, very scared about the sizable bet I put on Brown, and I think the 2 or 3 parlays that I bought and had him included in. Brown is almost, in my opinion, going into like a Frankie Edgar category where he's hell of a fighter, top 5, just a fucking beast, but seems to get rocked a lot, seems to, maybe not have a very good chin, but have an incredible heart to make up for the shaky chin. Brown took some shots and was obviously rocked, but went to his wrestling, which was his big advantage in the fight against Tim Means, got it to the ground, and subbed him out with a guillotine choke with 16 seconds remaining in the first round. Then in the main card, we start off with a bantamweight fight, Thomas Almeida fighting Brad Pickett. And I think this was the most one-sided fight on the entire card. I saw some lines as wild as -1,000 for Thomas Almeida. I think it evened out to maybe around minus 6 or 700. Man, Pickett looked game the first round, looked really game, was landing shots, and it almost seemed like the narrative of almost every single fight was one fighter starting off with the advantage and the second guy being in deep water, and I don't know if the second guy is going to be able to win, and the second guy either lands a strike or gets a takedown or does something to win the fight. But every single one of these fights was back and forth, this not being an exception. Pickett, shocking a lot of MMA fans, just the way he was able to get to Almeida and land strikes. But it ended up being the Brazilian Almeida who 30 seconds into the second round landed a flying knee. Wouldn't be the only flying knee knockout we saw on the main card, but was very impressive enough to bring Thomas Almeida's record to a nice even 20-0. And then we had Gunnar Nelson against Brandon Thatch, which, it just shows you this sport. Anyone can land a punch at any time. I mean, I still stick by my guns that Brandon Thatch is a much better striker than Gunnar Nelson, but anyone can land that punch that drops a guy. Nelson just landed a beautifully placed punch right on the chin of Brandon Thatch. Drops him, and once it got to the mat, it was game over. Nelson quickly asserted his dominance, got it to full mount. Brandon turns over, and Gunnar applies the rear naked choke, winning the fight via sub first round. Before we talk about potential opponents, what did you think of these three fights, Pat? I can't believe I was so confident in Thatch, and he got dropped. What the fucking fuck?
Oh, man. Well, I think Gunnar was really getting underrated, or his karate was. I mean, he's got some good karate. He maybe didn't get to show that as much. His 5-round war with Story, he just happened to run into the one guy. Like I always like to say, jiu-jitsu was invented for guys like Rick Story because you can't knock him out. If you go back and rewatch that fight, there's a lot of Gunnar Nelson. He cracked that jaw repeatedly on Story, but Story, you can't phase him. He's got the most legitimate win over Hendricks that anybody does in Rick Story, and I mean he's just a beast. So that, and having previously fought Zach Cummings in Gunnar Nelson, he was fighting a much larger guy who had a similar karate style that was able to kind of nullify Gunnar until Gunnar was able to use that jiu-jitsu, his world-class jiu-jitsu, kind of similar to the Brandon Thatch fight. But no, I thought that was just a little bit. I had that for Gunnar all day. I had actually picked him. And I mean, he's got great striking, world-class grappling. He's going to put it together, I feel. And the Pickett Almeida fight, like you had mentioned, I think we were all pretty surprised and pleased. I mean, Pickett's a crowd favorite, at least for me. He's a UK guy, but I love me some Brad Pickett. He's a fantastic mixed martial artist. One punch. He can do it all. He's good everywhere they go. He's a very complete mixed martial artist, not unlike Michael Bisping. The boxing's great. I was actually just rewatching his fight with Eddie Wineland today. He's got super tight defense. He's run into some troubles as of late, and especially on Saturday night. I mean, he ran into this young dude. I mean, I think we were talking about that fight in Vegas, and I mean, I was saying, you know what? If Almeida were 36 and Pickett were 23, it might have went the other way. But hey, ifs and buts. Pickett was definitely getting the better of him. He hurt Almeida. He blew that nose right up, and had the young buck in trouble. But hey, you know what? Young buck, he rose to the occasion, and he delivered just a spectacular flying knee knockout. I mean, that was just a ridiculous finish, and a good show for him. And I think, hey, there's no moral victories in my book, but hey, good for Brad Pickett. He certainly didn't look like a plus 600 or anything in there. He made it look like a good, even fight. And then Matt Brown versus Tim Means. I mean, that fight, I love that fight. I love both fighters. I'm a big fan of the Dirty Bird. Me and Ray, shout out to Ray, MMA Mental. We got to interview the Dirty Bird back in the day, and he's a great interview. Good dude, and super fun to watch. He's got some great skills. I thought it was going to be real close, and especially you go back and you watch their fights. They're both great with the elbows. They're super fierce dudes. They're almost carbon copies of each other. But Jake, as you touched on, Matt just has that wrestling, and that was the edge. He had that wrestling and grappling advantage, and he was able to get it done in a big way over 10 means.
Yeah, and as far as who next for the three winners, Brown, Almeida, and Gunnar Nelson. Brown, I really want to finally see that matchup between Matt Brown and Carlos Condit. That would just, goddamn, that would be a hell of a war. I remember, I think I was living in Gainesville back in 2012 when it was first announced, and I was really excited for it. And then I think Brown suffered that back injury, and then Condit was on the rack for a while with that knee he suffered against Woodley. I think now is the time. If you're ever going to make Brown versus Condit, it's now. So let's make Matt Brown against Carlos Condit. For Thomas Almeida, I don't think you want to push this guy up the ranks too fast. You know, he's still pretty young. He's 23. There's absolutely no rush to getting him, to fight top 5 guys. I really think Thomas Almeida and Aljamain Sterling are the two bright prospects in the UFC's 135-pound weight class. And eventually, I think they'll be the next Barao and Dillashaw. They're both incredibly talented. Not just that, but more importantly, they seem to be getting better and better and better. So maybe, I'm thinking about bantamweights, maybe Francisco Rivera, who lost to Takeya Mizugaki and Uriah Faber, just got back in the win column against Alex Caceres. If he's able to beat John Lineker at UFC 191 in September in Vegas, then let's make Rivera versus Almeida. And if John Lineker wins that matchup and stays at 35, I wouldn't mind seeing that too. But I'm thinking that in all likelihood, sort of like Gastelum, they moved both guys up a weight class when they failed to make weight. Lineker for the 4th time, Gastelum for the 2nd time. I think both guys are going to want to move back down after they serve, I guess, their 1-fight probation, if you want to call it that, at a higher weight class. And for Gunnar Nelson, this is, I've heard a very wide range of fighters who fans want to see Nelson fight next. A lot of fans want to see him get thrown back in with the Wolves and fight, a top 10 fighter, maybe the winner of Maia versus Magny. But I sort of subscribe to the slow burn. We saw in the Zach Cummings fight, and even more so in the Rick Story fight, that Nelson, I think, needs a little time to work on his stand-up, work on how he deals with strong wrestlers. So maybe give him an Albert Tumanov fight. I think Tumanov expressed interest in fighting the Icelandic prospect, and that would be a fun-ass fight. He's not a bum at all, and it would be a logical next step for Gunnar Nelson. Maybe, I don't know, a little step down from Thatch, but, Thatch, man, I don't know who you put next for Brandon Thatch. That, whether you give him a guy who will strike with him, like a Ponzinibbio or a Hungyu Lim. You look at his prior opponents who he just walked through. It's really hard to see how Thatch has gone from being so dominant against one style to then fighting a different style like a Nelson or a Bendo and just getting his ass handed to him. Pat, who do you see next for guys like Matt Brown, Gunnar Nelson?
Man, you know what? That's just a really tough call. I mean, you've had a lot of great suggestions there with Brown versus Condit. I think that'd be a fun fight to make. Definitely rankings wise makes sense right about now. Heck, you know what though? I could almost see Gunnar Nelson and Matt Brown being paired up against each other though. I think
Rest
that'd
in
be.
peace, Gunnar Nelson.
Oh man, you know what? That would be a fun fight. That would be a very fun fight. And hey, a true test for Gunnar. You know, Matt Brown, I want to say would probably have a slight height and reach on him. Definitely a pressure fighter. Uses the 8 points, so he's got a lot of attacks. Gunnar Nelson, I don't really recall seeing a lot of clinch-based striking from him. But you know what? I do think he has a lot of really creative striking. I would put him up there with, maybe not right up there with a Wonder Boy, but he's got some striking. He's got legit chops to go with his ground game, and he's definitely a threat. So you know what? I say, hey, let's put those two together.
Yeah, that would be a fun ass fight. You know, your classic striker grappler. Which I don't know. You talk about Nelson's karate. Until I see a little bit more, I'm the last person who wants to question a great striker and take away from a guy's skill set. But Lucky Punch, if I've ever seen one. My God,
son of a bitch. Oh, no. Look, you can go back now. Look at I want to say it was this fight, Gunnar Nelson versus Omari Akhmedov, I believe it was, who was coming down from 185, a very highly credentialed master of sports, and Gunnar Nelson dropped Akhmedov with one super clean punch, choked him out, just about as clean as you can get. He's got precision striking. I'm telling you.
You might be right. That Akhmedov guy didn't look too bad against Brian Ebersol. Just a couple months, I think. We'll see if Gunnar will prove me wrong. But one guy you cannot argue his striking, Jeremy Stephens. My God, I talked about how the narrative in so many fights was a guy being down and just rallying. And, Stephens was probably going to lose that fight if he didn't finish it in the third round. Dennis was really, really sort of neutralizing him and stuffing him out with wrestling in the first and second round. And Jeremy Stephens lands this knee, which was unlike any flying knee I've ever seen. Whereas most knees you see most flying knees, you're leaping forward to catch him with the knee. This one was a straight tiger knee off a Street Fighter. Fucking Bermudez lunges in with a punch, and Jeremy Stephens just jumps up, like straight up, even a little bit backwards with a knee, catches him, finishes the fight. Unfortunately, because Stephens did not make weight, he was not eligible for a bonus, which he probably would have gotten, and I think he lost, 8 G's that ended up going to Dennis Bermudez from his, I'm looking now, 20% of his purse, $8,000 goes to the loser. And I believe a rematch has been set at UFC 192 between the two. Stephens was 4.5 pounds over, weighed in at 149.5. It was a featherweight fight scheduled for 145. I guess I agree with Stephens needing to give up his purse and not getting a bonus. But as far as making a rematch, I really don't know if I agree with a rematch after such a exclamation point of a finish. Just a flying knee, knocks him out cold. But I guess we will see a rematch. I would have loved to see Stephens maybe fight think Max Holloway is fighting Charles Oliveira next month. I would have loved to see Max versus Stevens. You know, a very a striker in Max who has a lot of output against a guy in Stevens who just lands these power hits. But apparently his next fight will be a rematch against Dennis Bermudez at UFC 192. I believe that'll be, I think that's the Houston, DC versus Gus card. I'll look that up. But Stevens, Pat, your boy, you were big on him. Said the weigh-in sort of made you waver a little bit, which, I mean, I don't blame you. When a guy misses weight, you have to think, well, he probably pushed himself as hard as he could to make the weight, so he's probably going to really be feeling the effects of the cut just 24 hours later in his fight. But Stevens, you know, maybe that was one of the reasons why Bermudez was able to sort of grind on him those first 2 rounds. But that 3rd round, that knee, that was... He gave him the business.
Yeah, that was the beautiful. I mean, he hit him with the fadeaway. That was just ridiculous. I mean, how do you? It's so hard to compare that to the Almeida flying knee knockout. I mean, so drastically similar, but so very beautiful. And I mean, both, you know, like you mentioned, Bermudez very well could have been up on the judges' scorecards before the dramatic finish by Stevens. Not dissimilar from the Almeida Pickett fight. I mean, I would be willing to bet Brad Pickett had to have won that first round against Almeida. So both come from behind flying knee knockouts. I mean, it was just fantastic. I was very high on Stevens, you know, from Jump Street when that match was made. But yeah, that missing a weight, I mean, in a non-title featherweight match, you've got 146 pounds, but you're still missing by 3.5 pounds if you're going by that. So that's a fairly excessive amount to miss there. So, and that's got to sting, being ineligible for those performance bonuses, having to, you know, forfeit, what was it, 30% of your purse, I believe that was. So, you know, that stings. Heck, hopefully Jeremy Stevens is happy he's getting that rematch so he can try and make some more money here, because he really shot himself in the foot there. Ended up coming away with the W, though. So, you know, as far as who they're facing next, I mean, apparently they are doing that rematch. And Holloway versus Stevens wouldn't be a bad matchup. We've seen Stevens kind of struggle with your taller, rangier guys at 145. So it'd be interesting to see if he can overcome that hurdle.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he would get in a fight with Max. Which, you look at the current top 8 at 145. You know, you've obviously got your big dogs up top: Aldo, McGregor, Edgar, Mendez. But then when you get to the next 5, it's a really interesting matchup that, man, all of the guys match up very differently against one another. Lamas, Holloway, Swanson, Oliveira, Stevens, Bermudez, Lentz. I mean, this is one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC. And we'll likely, you know, see him keep fighting one another. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to Holloway versus Oliveira in a month. Think Holloway will be a favorite there. And, yeah, he's minus 165 currently at the UFC Fight Night 74 card, which will be headlined by the 2 featherweights. Man, it's really impressive to see how Max has risen up the featherweights since losing to Conor Mac back in, I guess 2013 or so. Yeah, that was August 2013 at the Shogun Sonnen Fox card, or Fox Sports 1. I think it was the first Fox Sports 1 card. But let's move on to the co-main event. Man, if the word barn burner could only be applied to one fight, it might be this fight. Just absolute carnage, man. That's all I can say. Lawler versus Rory. this was the opposite of Rory versus Jake Ellenberger, where you were promised fireworks and they just sort of stared at each other the entire fight. Robbie and Rory were trying to take each other's heads off from the opening bell. The first round, just razor close. They both landed a lot of shots. Second round, Robbie starts to turn it on. Rory's face starts getting a bit bloody. Rory starts to look fucked up. You think, damn, Robbie for sure won the second, maybe won the first. So it's either 2-0 Robbie or 1-1, and Robbie is for sure in the driver's seat. Then the third round, Rory McDonald fucking takes over. Starts landing not just single power punches, but these combos where Lawler, a veteran, he's been doing this a long time, just gets pieced up with these knees and left, right, knee, kick, left, right, just piecing him up back against the cage, looking dominant. Comes back out in the fourth round. Somehow, I don't know how, but in the third round and fourth round, Rory dominated the fight, but the few shots Robbie snuck in were absolute haymakers that wrecked Rory's face. When Rory came out in the fourth round, and especially again in the fifth round, he did not look like Rory McDonald. He looked like a serial killer. Like, the guy just looked, his face was torn up, and the expression on his face of just, knowing he's completely broken, but he's still winning the fight going into the fifth round, up 3-1 on every judge's scorecard. All he needed to do was survive for 5 more minutes, and he would have been the new welterweight champion. And a minute into the fifth round, Robbie Lawler lands a right that completely shattered Rory's nose. And I saw a lot of comments on Twitter calling him a pussy for giving up this and that. And I know a lot of them were tongue-in-cheek, being sarcastic, because he showed so much heart in this fight. But a few of them weren't. And, man, if your nose gets shattered and you can feel the bone fragments floating up into your brain, I don't know if pussy is the right word to use for a guy who knows where his limits are. And I think Rory realized that the damage in his nose and his face and potentially to his brain was so severe that he needed, in order to maybe save his career, he needed to say, I'm done. And Rory took the shot, covered up, and the ref stopped it at the right time. Robbie Lawler, just think about the last 2 fifth rounds Robbie Lawler had. The one against Johnny, where he roars back, UFC 181, Johnny's up on the scorecard. In the last 20 seconds of that fifth round, gives us one of the most ferocious onslaughts we've ever seen in mixed martial arts. And now the fifth round against Rory, where he probably knew it was either 3-1 Rory or 2-2. The first round was close, but all 3 judges actually ended up giving it to Rory, which is information that he didn't know. Only the judges knew at that time. He knew it was a very important round, and he came out, and once again in the fifth round just was an absolute Terminator, finishes it in 60 seconds into the final stanza, and remains your UFC champion at 170 pounds. I used to be very impartial on Rory. A lot of fans don't like him, which I get. He's got a very monotone way of talking, and when he's in interviews, it's really hard to start rooting for the guy, because almost like Gunnar Nelson, he seems bored with everything, and everything you ask him about, he says, yes, I'm having a good training camp and this and that. It's hard to get behind a guy who sort of lacks that, Conor or Chael, that it factor. But I became a huge fan of Rory, just showing the heart, going out in the fifth round, no part of his face not fucked up. Both of his eyes swole up as shit, his nose, a giant crack in it, his mouth bleeding. Fucking Lawler on the other side's lip is torn open so much that half of his mouth doesn't move when he's talking. I mean, both guys just took so much damage. I could talk about this fight for another hour, but it is, the more I've thought about it, for the longest time, Donald Cerrone versus Bendo, their first fight in the WEC, was my favorite fight of all time. But, man, as much as I like that fight, the more I think about it and the more I sort of analyze the best fights I've seen, I think this is my favorite fight ever. Pat, what did you think of Lawler-Rory, the second of what I hope will be at least a trilogy? Both of these guys, such gamers.
You know what, Jake? This fight was just the work of animals. I don't even really know how to put into words what I had seen that night.
I do.
Yeah, exactly. This is it's like that moment when you're watching a knockout and you're on the couch with your buddies and you all jump up. Oh shit! It's that oh shit moment where you're spilling the beer and the chips go flying everywhere. You're jumping up off the couch. This was like pretty much that entire fight.
Yeah, it was like 21 minutes of that.
Yeah, it was just pure nonstop insanity. Yeah, it's. I really don't know. I mean, that has to be the best fight I've ever seen. I'm trying to think of fights that were better. I mean, you can't really do better than that fight. You could potentially do as good. I mean, I don't know. Henderson versus Shogun 1 was fucking off the charts epic. There was a lot of great fights, but this one right here, I mean, just the work of sadists, really. Rory McDonald, like you said, what he was doing to Robbie Lawler, it just, I don't know how he didn't win that fight, but like you said, just the shots that Robbie Lawler did land. I mean, I guess you can kind of say it was like Henderson Shogun 1. In the first minute of that fight, Hendo pretty much takes Shogun and just punches him in the face a bunch of times, and he's just instantly bloody. His entire face is destroyed instantly. And that was pretty much what happened with Lawler. The couple strikes he did get in just completely ruined Rory. And that's what Robbie Lawler does. He throws just with the insane heat. You go back to his fight with Melvin Manhoef. When Manhoef just destroyed his legs, Robbie could barely even walk. He actually really couldn't walk out of the cage. He was basically carried out of the cage, just blasted with leg kicks. Somehow, with whatever strength he has left, blast Melvin Manhoef with this insane sequence of punches that just absolutely destroys him. Basically, I was afraid for Manhoef's life at that point. He was just so thoroughly knocked unconscious. Fortunately, Manhoef did wake up. He's still with us today. But that's what Robbie Lawler does. He just throws with just the insanity, and he has zero quit in him. And his ability to take damage also has to play some sort of part in that. His lip, that hole that was busted in his face, while severe and disgusting. I mean, you're not going to be able to remember your grandkids' names because you got a hole in your lip. Yeah. The kind of shit that was happening to Rory McDonald, we're talking just the most severe of head trauma. I mean, well, not to say Robbie Lawler probably didn't have an IQ point or two shaved off that night, that's for sure.
Like, this almost makes me think about the rematch between Kane and Jr., because that fight took a toll on both guys. Not just, that night. But that fight took a chunk off of both guys' career. I mean, fights like that where you're not only taking so much medical damage, cuts and bruises, but I mean, your brain, over your lifetime, your brain can only take so much trauma. Your skull can only deal with so much bullshit. And I think very similar to that, Lawler, we don't know, what his career gas tank looks like. His first UFC fight was 13 years ago. Rory, obviously a lot less wear on him, but I'm really interested to see the trajectory of both of these guys' careers moving forward, because they're undoubtedly two of the best welterweights, if not the best two welterweights in the world. But I don't know how either of these guys escapes UFC 189 without, career altering just damage and wear. Like that was a fight that takes a little bit off your career if I've ever seen one.
Oh, absolutely. That was, I mean, if we can just go back to Kane and Junior Dos Santos, I mean, sweet Jesus, I feel so bad just even watching those fights. Those are like snuff films. You put
Junior
the total
was
damage.
pissing brown after the second one.
Oh man, Junior lost about a decade on his life. If Junior was going to live to be 80 years old, he's going to die at 70 now, just based on those two fights. I'm sorry to say, Junior, if you're listening, which I know you are. But goddamn, those fights, and hey, that happens. There's just, there's traumatic events like that happen, and just getting bludgeoned repeatedly for X amount of minutes will certainly do that to you. I mean, we talk about Rory having a little more in the gas tank just by virtue of being younger in his career, having less road miles on him, if you will. But he has taken some beatings himself. His first fight with Robbie Lawler, although that was also a very back and forth battle. That was a split decision, and not quite as dramatic as the first one, but still very. That was a brutal fight right there. He was finished by Condit in their fight, and so he's taken some damage in his time. Hell, the first round with Damian Maia, he got the shit beat out of him. Yeah. Damian Maia got that full mount and just wailed on him with these elbows, savage elbows. I mean, you have to, if you want to question Rory's heart, you can just go back and watch that fight. That's very easily he could have given in right there. Having Damian Maia in your full mount, raining down those elbows like that, just ruining your life. Easily could have thrown in the towel and tapped right there. But
170, I believe, if you want to go back and watch it on Fight Pass or torrents, however the hell you go back and watch cards.
Strictly Fight Pass, of course. Strictly Fight Pass. 170. That was oh god, I don't even remember, but that was just a great comeback story for Rory McDonald, and a great testament to his heart, because he did hang in there and come back and win those second and third rounds. But he does have some accumulation of damage on him. I don't want to throw him in the Stefan Struve category of young dudes who have a lot of miles on them. But he's been through a little bit. Robbie Lawler, not as much. Actually, I want to say probably a little less in the cumulative damage. I mean, he's only had the one knockout loss in his career, which was against Nick Diaz, and that was like a single punch knockout that just, I mean, well, we've all seen the highlight of that one. Again, not a whole lot of cumulative damage there. That was just one shot. And his chin has held up remarkably well, especially when you take a look at the beast he's taken shots from since then.
Melvin Manhoef.
Fucking Manhoef.
Tons of guys.
I mean, Hendricks, come on now. Hendricks hits like a freight train. We can be sure of that.
Fought him twice, fought Brown for 25 minutes.
Yeah. And took
Scott Smith, who back in 2008 when they, fought twice. Smith, dude, that motherfucker
he was in it.
Could bang, yeah.
Oh, Smith, God, you know what? God bless Scott Smith. I hope him and his kids are doing great. I'll never forget Scott Smith's Strike Force fight where he had his kids. Uh, he brought his kids to the ring, and like I want to say he got the win, but it was a typical Scott Smith performance. He got the piss beat out of him, and then got this incredible come from behind knockout. His kids were in the ring, fucking crying and shit. It was
that the
like I was
Kung
like,
Lee fight?
oh, it could have been the Kung Lee fight. I do not recall. Rest in peace, Strike Force. Those are good days, or maybe it was Elite XC. If we're going back
Yeah.
that far, I can't be too sure. But anyways, we're getting way off track on this one. Jesus Christ, yeah, these guys, who knows where they go next? I mean, I will put my hand to God and say that Johnny Hendricks definitively beat Robbie Lawler in both the first and second matches. But I mean, I watched that fight with Rory McDonald, and I'm like, how, number one, did Hendricks do that in the first place? And how is he going to do that a third time to get his belt back?
Yeah.
Of course, assuming Lawler does have his belt when they do meet up again. It's crazy. And then as for Rory Mack, I mean, you can't deny him top 3, top 5 status in the 170 division. Robbie Lawler is just a wild fucking animal. That's all you can really say. You just have to put him down in the ring. Again, he's like a Rick Story type. Jiu-jitsu was invented so you could submit guys like them because they're just so scary and crazy. You can't knock them out. They're just going to keep coming right for you no matter how many times you punch them or what objects you try to assault them with. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they go next. But I think they both have some good time left in the sport.
Yeah, and you know what you said brings us to our next point, which is who next for Robbie Lawler. Looking at the top 5, I mean, I don't know. This is a very stacked weight class, but there seems to only be one option in my eyes. You have Matt Brown at 5, who you don't make Lawler versus Brown, because Brown is on a 1-fight winning streak after losing to both Robbie and Johnny. Fought in the prelims of 189, so I think you can rule Brown out of a title shot. Carlos Condit, yeah, I mean, the guy has a losing record in his last 5. He lost to GSP, lost to Johnny, and lost to Woodley. His only 2 wins against Martin Kampman and Thiago Alves. He's got to score a better win than Kampman or Alves before I can throw him in a title shot in one of the most stacked weight classes in the UFC. Moving up, Woodley. Again, Woodley, you know, he lost to Rory. He didn't just lose to Rory. Rory fed him his ass in a lunchbox. I mean, just completely dominated him at UFC 174. Just peppered him with strikes. Since then, Woodley has scored wins against Dong Young Kim in a split decision win against Kelvin Gastelum. Again, sort of like Condit. In my eyes, you got to score a better win than that. At 2, you have Rory Mack, which as much as I want to see that trilogy, and I think it eventually happens, you don't book a rematch after a fight gets finished like that. And number 1, the only name that makes sense, Johnny Big Rig Hendricks. Maybe, you know, I don't know how long Robbie is going to be on the shelf. If it's going to be a while, maybe make Johnny against Woodley. I think that would be a nice, you know, definitive title eliminator match. But if I just got to choose one guy out of that welterweight mix, we've seen the fight, you know, go twice now for the title. I say, you know, if you've got to choose one, the only answer that makes sense is Johnny, who, man, you know, I feel like the guy has fought in 3 title fights. He's 1-2. I think most fans would argue he's 3-0. I think most people thought he won that fight against GSP at UFC 167. I think he got robbed. I think the crowd noise in that fight where Johnny won the first round, I was there watching it live, and I actually scored it a 10-10 draw. Looking back, Johnny easily won it, but crowd noise can so easily sway the judges one way or another. And just the fact was, when Johnny landed in the first round, the crowd was silent. And when GSP would land a glancing kick, the crowd would erupt. So it was around that Johnny won. Crowd noise is always a factor, which I've been saying for a while now. Put these judges in a soundproof box in the back without, without Rogan, without Goldie, without crowd noise. Just, make them watch it silent. And it seems a very weird thing to do, but I don't know. I think crowd noise, especially when you have a situation like Vegas where, another country will come and just overrun Vegas, very much like Ireland did at 189, very much like Canada did at UFC 167, or in a place like Brazil where the hometown guy is just going to get all the love. It can really sway a judge back and forth. So Johnny, I think he beat GSP. He did win at UFC 171 against Robbie, and UFC 181, the rematch between Robbie and Johnny. I thought Johnny won. It was the least angry I've been after seeing a judge's decision I disagreed with, only because it was such a nice Cinderella story with Lawler sort of, coming back from all he'd been through in his career, losing to Lorenz Larkin in Strikeforce, to rallying and being the UFC champ. So it was a nice story. And after that onslaught I talked about earlier in the 5th round against Johnny at 181, was nice to see him get the win. That being said, Johnny won the fight, and the guy just goes and wins. So if I'm choosing one dude, it's got to be Johnny next for the welterweight belt. Which, since losing to Rick Story back 5 years ago, his only 2 losses were those controversial split decision losses that I and a lot of other fans think he won.
Yeah, Jake, and I agree 100% on all fronts. Judges in soundproof booths, I will put the stamp on that. That sounds like a solid idea. Makes all the sense in the world. But especially the rematch between Robbie Lawler and Johnny Hendricks, or the rematch, definitely needs to happen. I think that's just the most logical thing to do. I think it's kind of crazy considering the nature of that decision that Johnny Hendricks didn't get the immediate rematch. But hey, it is what it is. Hendricks went on, fought Matt Brown, beat him. So, hey, let's go ahead and make that match. It's going to be really interesting to see what that third fight looks like. The Robbie Lawler we've seen as of late just has just been tearing fools up. So it's going to be crazy to see how that goes. And as for Rory McDonald, I'd kind of like to see him take on, I'd like to see him take on Rick Story next. I think with his resurgence at 170 and Rory coming off that loss, hey, why not? I think it's a good test for the evolving Rick Story.
Yeah, that would be fucking fun too. Before we get to the main event, quick shout out to, I mentioned DJ Jeans. But I would be remiss without mentioning our buddies from the MMA Playground who we met up with for wings and beer. Our boy Brandon Saylor at KO Power 15, and of course Chris Martinez at Spider Silva 99. 2 friends of the show, friends on the MMA Playground. It was really cool to get some brews. Also, a quick shout out to MMA Enthusiast and Just Bleed MMA tweeting out links for the show. We love you, beautiful fucks.
True
motherfucking G's. Let's move on to the main event. Man, such a backstory to it, from the world tour that Conor and Aldo went on to Aldo backing out of the fight last minute, and all the news that circled around that, and all the he said, she said bullshit. Is this his X-ray? Did he break his rib? Why did his training partner come out and, immediately say, "Oh, it was me"? It all was so bizarre. But it was nice to just sort of get over all the Aldo bullshit. And it took me a week or two to really start appreciating the matchup and realizing, damn, this is going to be a good-ass fight. I was very bummed out that we weren't going to see Jose versus Conor. But after a while, it really set in. Like, all right, everyone has been saying over and over, Conor is getting a title shot without being tested by a wrestler. And that's kind of bullshit. And, man, talk about being tested by a wrestler. Chad Mendes is probably the best wrestler at 145. Chad Mendes is a motherfucker. Like a 5'6" Hulk, just going in there and taking everyone down. Took the fight on 12 days' notice. And Conor, I mean, man, this fight was just so crazy and so unique in so many different ways. I've talked about how Vegas is a really weird place, because in most fights I've gone to, the foreigner has the advantage, because there's not many, when you're talking about a fight in Vegas, a big fight in Vegas, there's not many Vegas residents at those fights. It's probably 95% plus folks flying in. And when you're talking about folks flying in for a fight, you're going to see a lot of fans from different countries flying into Vegas, planning, their yearly vacation, along with when their favorite fighter is going to have a huge fight. Whether it's UFC 167, which was my first time ever to Vegas, my first time ever at a UFC, and I was like, this is really weird. There are more Canadian fans than American fans. There are louder chants for Rory McDonald and GSP than there are for the fighters fighting in their home country in Lawler and Johnny. And I was like, man, these fucking Canucks come out hard. And then I saw it again. UFC what was it? UFC 175. There was louder chants for Lyoto than there was for Chris Weidman. Like, damn, this is crazy. UFC 182, you didn't really see that because it was an American versus an American in the main event, Jones versus DC. But UFC 187, I went, and Vitor Belfort got louder chants than anyone else, than Weidman, DC, Rumble. There were so many yellow Brazilian soccer jerseys in the crowd that it was you really see, like, Jesus Christ, this is Vegas is, if anything, home turf for the foreign fighter. Things didn't change for UFC 189. The only thing that was different, I thought there was a ton of Canadian fans there for Rory and GSP. I thought there was a ton of fans from Brazil for Lyoto at 175, and then Vitor at 187. Even more for Vitor. They can't hold a candle. They can't get close to the amount of Irish fans that were in Las Vegas for UFC 189. That shit was unbelievable. Jay and I went to the MGM Grand Garden Arena for the weigh-ins. Showed up, I think, 15-20 minutes before it started. Typical. I don't really care about where I'm sitting for the weigh-ins, but it's fun, to see and all that. Nope, sorry, it's closed. Like, for 187, they did the weigh-ins, I think, in, like, a conference room in the MGM Grand. 189, they opened up the whole arena. So I thought, of course it won't sell out. It's sold out. There was not a seat left in the entire building. The fire marshals shut it down. They weren't letting anyone else in. Jay and I actually, it's funny, we watched it on my phone in the little food court right outside the Grand Garden Arena. And when it ended, I mean, just loud chants, ole, 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 ole. The chants, walking in McGregor's Wonderland. Just, they were singing and screaming. It was almost scary. Just the hordes, the throngs of Irish fans, just loud and cheering on Conor. We ended up staying in the casino between the weigh-ins and the Rogan stand-up show, which was like 4 hours later, and we were sitting playing video roulette with a Scottish guy next to us who I literally couldn't understand a word this motherfucker was saying, but I was nodding and going like, yeah, sitting there in the casino at the MGM Grand. I guess this was Friday night. I'm not exaggerating. Every 2 to 3 minutes, a group of fans would walk by us, drunk as fuck, screaming, ole, 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 or he'll do you, or what is it? He's coming for you. He'll do you into walking in McGregor's Wonderland, which ended up being quite, what is the word I'm looking for? Quite a prophecy. So many Irish fans. Conor ends up getting the win in the second round. I wasn't at the actual event because tickets were going for $4 or $5 hundo on StubHub, and I didn't really have the money to drop. Jay did go, said it was an absolute madhouse. From Sinead O'Connor, singing him out. Said the live act that sung Mendez out, you couldn't even hear because the fans were drowning them out with ole, 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 ole. But just the build up to this fight was unlike anything I've ever seen. And it shows you, man, the power in talking shit. Like, Chael Sonnen was one of the biggest draws ever. What did he do? Talk a lot of shit. Conor McGregor, yeah, he has had an amazing, road to the title. But, we see a lot of guys. We see 6 or 7 different guys a year have amazing roads to getting a title shot and reaching that pinnacle that aren't that much different than Conor. Just Conor, the way he talks, the way he captivates a crowd, getting on SportsCenter, getting on Conan O'Brien. Everyone wants to hear what this guy has got to say next. And talking to most fans thought that Chad Mendes posed a much greater threat to Conor than Jose Aldo did. And what a fight it was, man. I mean, just the first round, Chad wins it easy, 10-9. And from an interview I think I heard yesterday with Ariel Helwani and Conor McGregor's dad, I mean, Conor's mom was weeping and left, just like walked backstage. His sisters were crying. His girlfriend head in her hands. Things were not looking good for Conor early. I was getting ready to tweet out, looks like another round to Chad, 2-0. But with maybe 20 seconds left in the second round, Chad makes the mistake of, instead of just holding Conor down, goes for his sub. And I don't know whether he knew he was gassed out and needed to finish the fight then, because it really did look like stamina was taking a lot more from Chad than it was Conor, probably because Conor had been effectively in training camp for months while Chad took the fight on 12 days notice. Chad looked to be a little more gassed, went for the sub, doesn't get it. Conor's able to use the sub escape to stand it up. And you could see Chad was, fading some. Conor starts piecing the punches and the kicks, lands a body shot, and then the 1-2 finishes it, drops Chad with 3 seconds left in the second round. The crowd erupts. Shit. I had a lot of money riding on Chad. I would have probably been $300 or $400 richer, not just because I bet on Chad as an underdog, but I had like 2 or 3 parlays going that would have cashed if Chad won. I think I had Mendez, Lawler, and Brown. I put like $20 on that to win a few hundo, but fuck, Chad loses. I thought I would be a little bummed out if he lost, just because I bet on Chad. But I was actually pleased, smiling, just knowing the sport is gonna grow so much more. You're gonna get so many eyes from the mainstream fans on the sport with Conor fighting again for a title. You saw a rare side of Conor, a very humble side of him. Conor leading up to fights is very brash, very cocky and arrogant, but it looked like Conor was either about to cry or was crying. Just looked very, very humbled. Took Chad, hugged him. They exchanged some friendly words, which was really nice to see after the very contentious lead up to the fight between Conor and Chad, which is why I love this fucking sport, man. You can have two guys who literally hate one another, and then they fight and they do, damage. Conor's bleeding from his ear. Chad just got knocked out, and then they're fucking buddies. That's an amazing aspect of mixed martial arts. In front of a giant crowd, 16,000. The gate was 7.2 million, all there to see Conor take the belt back to Ireland, and he does just that, winning the interim championship. I've been ranting long enough about this fight. Pat, what did you think about the wild lead up to Conor versus Chad and Conor getting the UFC interim featherweight championship?
Well, Jake, this really was just the craziest lead up to one of the biggest, most hyped matches, or probably the most hyped match in UFC history. And that match changed. And we no longer got the most hyped match in UFC history, but we did end up getting one of the most hyped fighters in UFC history, and the true test that a lot of people, of course, a lot of people wanted to see him face Jose Aldo, but as you alluded to, a lot of people wanted to see him face that test in a strong wrestler. And he got it in Chad Mendes. And, really, they both only had 12 days to prepare. Of course, McGregor was in a full camp, although I'm sure what is a full camp with the kind of media duties that he was doing for this fight.
Very good point.
Really, the media tour that they did, just the relentless amount of interviews. It's amazing to me that his stamina did look any better than Chad Mendes. It was just a wild fight. And hey, McGregor, he was able to get up from a couple takedowns, but again, that's the thing. Chad only had 12 days for this fight, but so did Conor. For sure Conor probably wasn't working on his sprawl coming up against Jose Aldo. Maybe he was doing some rolling around with Gunny, working those grappling techniques or something like that in case, it ended up on the mat. But I don't think they were planning on Jose shooting a single on him or anything like that. Who knows? I wasn't there for the camp, but just saying, we're talking about preparation for two completely different opponents, and just the mentality. You've got a completely different mentality. This is something that for months has been planned on. Your mindset has been focused on that singular mindset, just, eyes on the prize, looking at your target ahead of you. And then that gets switched last minute, biggest fight of your life, fight for the title, and everything changes right there. So, that's huge pressure. That's a lot for Conor McGregor as well. So, in the end, it was Mendes dominating that fight for the most part, just, doing his thing that he does best. Of course, he's shown much improved striking lately, but with the reach advantage that Conor was having in that fight, why not do what you do and make the fight a little more better in your favor? And he worked that ground and pound beautifully. He really hit Conor with some big shots, and it just, he gassed and he went for that technique, and he knew, hey, they're going to start us off on our feet in the beginning of the third round, and hey, you know what? Maybe Conor will be able to shrug me off a little easier like he was at the beginning of the fight. That lactic acid starts building up, and it's a bitch. So he went for it, and he wasn't able to get it. And Conor McGregor, man, he capitalized, and he showed why he's one of the craftiest in the game, and also one of the hardest hitters. Jake, I know we talked about it a little bit, but I mean, Chad Mendes, of course, himself. I mean, Mendes, Stevens, Conor McGregor, those have to be the three hardest hitting guys at 145 pounds in the UFC.
Yeah.
And Conor McGregor, he just showed, you know what? It's, again, not just always muscle, but he showed some great technique. He put that, he put those precision strikes on Conor McGregor. And I actually want to say that that's something Conor McGregor had said himself as he was sitting right next to Gunnar Nelson for the 189 post-fight press conference. It wasn't that he said McGregor was super powerful or anything. It was the precision, which, hey, kind of a backhanded compliment there, but hey, take it how you will. But that's what it is, and speed along with mass equals force, if I'm remembering that correctly. So
Einstein up in this shit.
That's what it is, son. That's physics. You combine that with the skill, and that's just what happened. Full camp. Hey, let's see. Although we got to do Aldo versus McGregor. Of course, that's on tap next. So we got to see how that one plays out. But I wouldn't doubt that McGregor and Mendes end up meeting at some point again here in the future, and both of them will have a full camp. And hey, let's see how that goes down the road. But yeah, this fight, it was great. I mean, the Irish crowd, they got what they loved. I'm a big McGregor fan. I'm a fan of Mendes as well. He's just as solid as you get, 145, perennial top contender. Really, between him, Frankie Edgar, Jose Aldo, Conor McGregor, I feel like any one of them could be champion on any given night. Hell, just go back and rewatch Frankie Edgar versus Jose Aldo. That was a razor-thin fight right there. Just a bunch of beasts, and just a fantastic cap on to what was one of the best fight cards ever. And I've seen a couple of these in the past, but this was definitely the most dramatic, as you had mentioned, main card where seemingly every single fighter who ended up winning was in deep waters. Means rocked Brown. Actually, Means versus Brown, that was on the prelims if I'm not mistaken. But really pick your fight. Pickett versus Almeida, Lawler versus McDonald, Mendes versus McGregor, Stevens Bermudez. Yeah, it was just insane. Jake, as you were mentioning, if you wanted to show a card to a fan or to someone who wasn't necessarily a fan, just a casual fan, you would want to have this event on. You would want to play this for them. And you know what? MMA fans, we gotta get the homies together. With Pacquiao Mayweather, everybody was rounding up for the fights. Everybody's going to the bar. Everybody's, you're doing the house party for the big boxing match, which nobody ever does ever. But we got the UFC popping all the time, and they constantly deliver. That's the thing. With Pacquiao versus Mayweather, we got what we all thought we were going to get, which was just a boring, point-fighting boxing match. Nothing dramatic happening whatsoever. With this UFC fight, this was one of those cards that will really make you fall in love with the sport. If you did not love the sport previously, or you don't fall in love with it having watched that card, you're just you just don't like fights. And this was one of those ones where it was just had that sense of magic to it, like your Bonner Griffin ones, which I mean, for any of the buddy who might be listening that was watching that fight live, I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody who was watching that fight on Spike TV that night just had that crazy feeling that you were just watching history right there. And that's what it was with UFC 189.
Yeah, and looking forward as far as fights to make, I think pretty inarguably now that Conor is the interim champ, you got to give him Jose. And I've heard rumblings about the fight maybe going down in December in Dallas at Cowboy Stadium, a stadium show. That would be a fun-ass card, but we'll have to stay tuned for that. Let's talk about Chad. Usually, it isn't worth talking about who the loser gets next, but when there is a belt on the line, it might be worth it. Do you move Chad? Do you knock him down so he's got to get a few more fights to work back up to a title fight? Or do you make Chad versus Frankie next and let the winner of that get the next shot? You can argue that maybe you give Chad another crack at the title early to mid 2016 just because the guy took the fight on 12 days notice. Personally, I think under those top four guys, Aldo McGregor, Edgar Mendez, I think there's a little bit of sorting out to do. And pardon me, I also think that these are unquestionably your top four. After that, I broke it down a little while ago. Lamas, Holloway, Swanson, Oliveira. Holloway, for me, is the name that stands out there, and he's young enough to where he can wait a little while. Say Max beats Charles Oliveira. He already beat Cub Swanson. Maybe make Holloway versus Lamas, and the winner of that, is the next one to sort of move up a step into that rarefied air where Aldo, Conor, Edgar, and Mendez are. I say make Frankie versus Chad for a title shot, and then you've eventually early 2016, early to spring. You have the winner, the undisputed champ between Conor and Aldo going up against the winner of Frankie and Chad. What do you think, P Money?
Jake, we are just synced up tonight. It's crazy, yeah. And I'm sure the listeners must just hate that. Nobody likes listening to podcasts where everybody just fucking agrees all the time.
This is the exact opposite of First Take on ESPN, where Stephen A. Smith and Skip Bayless are like calling each other cocksuckers and shit. We're just like, yeah, man, I really respect that and agree.
Gosh, you're so well spoken. No, you know what? I mean, hey, at least it's not fucking contrived. We all hate that contrived horse shit. But you know what? Really, I was sitting here just thinking, man, you got to give Mendez, somebody like Frankie Edgar. But as I was sitting here thinking about it, the only thing is, Frankie Edgar, can we just say this dude has just had the most fucked up run at 145 pounds. He very well could have been the UFC 145 pound champion in that fight versus Jose Aldo. That could have gone his way. Fight of the year. And it could have gone his way. And it could have been champ. But you know what? He hasn't bitched a lick. And he's probably won 4 fights after that and has not had a rematch. I mean, look at Chad Mendez. He got his rematch after, I don't know what, a 4, maybe, I think it was actually just a 4-fight win streak. And his first fight, not even close to what his first, Frankie Edgar's first fight was with Jose Aldo. Of course, there was the cage grab, but at least in my recollection, I go back and watch that fight. Yeah, there was a cage grab, but Jose Aldo did get taken down after that cage grab and still subsequently got back up. So, I mean, hey, I don't know. Anyways, in the end, Mendez got knocked out in the first round, got his rematch already. Edgar damn near took the title and has been fighting tough fights. I mean, just fought Uriah Faber at 145, took him to school. Mendez's homeboy right there. And, here he is, has not been able to get his rematch yet. So I don't know what the holdup is with that. And now, of course, with the UFC and Zuffa's cash cow and Conor McGregor, I mean, the stars have aligned for this fight with Jose Aldo. You have to believe that's a rematch. So what do you do with Edgar? I mean, you have to have him fight somebody. You don't want him sitting out for Lord knows how long. His fight was, in January, I want to say, against Uriah? Or no, it wasn't in January. Just been a whirlwind of fights this year, but either way, it wasn't that long ago. But I mean, you can't have Edgar on the shelf for a year plus, just waiting for the winner of Aldo McGregor. So I wouldn't be surprised if they give him Chad Mendez, and I wouldn't be surprised if that fight is similar to Faber versus Edgar. I mean, I'm super high on the answer. I always will be. I'm one of the rare few that will still say that Edgar beat that ass against BJ Penn in both fights. I got much love for the answer. So I think him and Mendez have a date coming up here pretty quick, and it'll be real interesting to see how that one goes.
I spoke with a few fans in Vegas, talked to Jay about it. I think the consensus was that maybe Frankie deserved it over Chad Mendez. He had been ranked higher in the UFC rankings. But one really good point that Jay brought up that I never really even thought of was that you knew with Conor and Chad that they were going to jaw back and forth, and they were going to have some contentious moments, and it was going to make the fight a lot more sellable. Whereas Frankie Edgar, you could get in that guy's face and be like, fuck your mother, you're a piece of shit, you're a bum, fuck you, I hate the shit out of you. And he'd just be like, cool, thanks, I'm really looking forward to fighting you, and I think we're going to have an amazing fight, and you're such a great opponent, and I'm looking forward to the challenges that you're going to offer, and, I'm really looking forward to this fight, and good luck, Frankie's just a nice guy. He's the last guy in the world who's gonna, talk shit and get mean and, just start a shit-talking war, whereas Chad will feed into it some. If you talk shit about it, he's not gonna play nice. He'll usually be nice, but if you fire at him, which Conor will, he'll fire back. Frankie is just like not only the last person in the world to fire back, but like, what are you going to even say about Frank? He never talks shit. All of his fights are impressive. He's one of maybe the top 10, 15 fighters ever. Jay was saying that he was maybe the greatest fighter of all time, and I sort of had to disagree with him there, but he's easily top 10, top 15, has had an amazing career. Even if you put a guy like Aldo, one of the most dominant fighters we've seen ever, in front of him, he's going to make it a war. He's going to fucking put up a fight. So from that standpoint, I guess I could see why you make Mendez, but yeah, Frankie, and as far as the top fours in each weight class, I think featherweight is unquestionably the best, because you have four guys in Aldo, Conor, Chad, and Frankie, who, if you put that skill set and put that fighter and move it somehow to a different weight class, that's a fucking champion. So you have four championship caliber fighters there. Very, very interested to see, what goes down between Aldo and Conor, and who's next and what's next for Chad and Frankie. And I think that about does it for UFC 189, unless you have anything to add in. I promised a short show. We're almost an hour and a half in here, but that was a giant bulk of it, and things should move along a little more swiftly moving forward.
Yeah, no, 189 was just epic. I mean, you have to really go over that just for posterity. Yeah, just a fantastic card.
Greatest card of all time, greatest fight of all time, most built up fight I've ever seen. It was historic in so many different ways. But we will move on. Sunday, July 12th. Pat, you unfortunately weren't able to be in Vegas on Saturday, but you got in town on Sunday. Jay was at the fights, and you and I took the fights in at the bar, had a few wings, a few what else did we order? Mozzarella sticks or something. A few brews, kicked them back. I only really want to break down the main event here. Your main card winners being Maximo Blanco, Michelle Watterson, Jorge Masvidal, and the two new tough champs, Kamaru Usman and Michael Graves. Let's talk about Stephen Thompson, Jake Ellenberger. This was a really difficult fight to handicap because you've seen both guys be very successful, while at the same time you've seen both guys get taken advantage of with tools that the other fighter possessed. You know, Jake has had an amazing career, really has only lost to elite guys, but had shown a little weakness when he faces a top-notch striker like a Stephen Thompson. Stephen Thompson was on a 4-fight winning streak, had also beaten very impressive talent, but his only loss came to a wrestler in Matt Brown, which Jake Ellenberger, wrestler, probably the best wrestler he had faced since that loss against Brown. So it stylistically matched up pretty well, just about as well as a fight can. And Jake, I mean, man, I don't know if he's got 40 fights under his belt. I don't know whether his like we talked about a career gas tank earlier with Robbie and Rory, maybe that's starting to fade a little bit. Jake now with this loss to Stephen Thompson, 1-4 in his last 5. Thompson ending it with 30 seconds left in the first round, a spinning hook kick KO. Stephen Thompson now 11-1. His only loss, that loss to Matt Brown I mentioned a few years ago. What did you think about the fight itself before we talk about who next for the Wonder Boy?
Oh, yeah, that was a beautiful display by the Wonder Boy. And Ellenberger, he hung in there. It wasn't super one-sided. Ellenberger did clip him with a big right. Had Wonder Boy hurt there for a minute. It was pretty much the only action that Ellenberger was able to get in, though. I mean, Wonder Boy, he just really seems like he's improving as he's coming along. I mean, he's 5-0 now since that loss to Matt Brown. And, again, it was the wrestling of Matt Brown, who, at least for me, that's not a guy I think of as a wrestler when I first think of Matt Brown. I think of Matt Brown as the Muay Thai guy, who's throwing the elbows at you. But Matt Brown, he does have legit grappling chops. And I would definitely, at least myself, I would say who's going to out-wrestle who, Matt Brown or Jake Ellenberger. I'd put Ellenberger as a better wrestler overall. And Wonder Boy Stephen Thompson, he was able to negotiate that test in Ellenberger, and I mean, just put some spectacular moves on him. Of course, Ellenberger, he has been on the wrong end of some beatings. And again, as we were talking a little bit earlier in the podcast, some beatings, and you know what? Sometimes it's just one big fight. I mean, hey, I tell you what, if you get hit in the head with a baseball bat, sometimes that'll change your life. Or even, hey, let's talk about our boy TJ Grant, who suffered a concussion in sparring, was about to fight for the title, had his title shot booked, and has been out for over 2 years, probably going on 3 now. just out with a concussion. Sometimes you take one big blow that can change your life. And Ellenberger, his knockout loss to Martin Kampman, that was a big knee that put him out. He's taken some shots, and you never know what kind of effect that can have almost immediately on your reaction time or other various factors. And man, Stephen Thompson was just able to. The fact I could have sworn Stephen Thompson landed a question mark kick even on Jake Ellenberger. The things he was able to do to him was just amazing. And I can't really say if that I would attribute that to Thompson's progression or Ellenberger's decline, but either way, it was a fantastic and violent main event.
Yeah, it capped off the weekend very well. I don't think there were many fans leaving Vegas who were unsatisfied in the weekend's two events. As far as who next for Stephen Thompson, I'd like to see the winner of maybe Damian Maia and Neil Magny face him. I know Ross tweeted out that he wanted to see a rematch with Thompson and Matt Brown, which would also be pretty fun. I hate to get on Joe Silva for matchmaking, because the guy does a good job. You think about the hundreds of fighters in the UFC. Most of them are booked extremely well. Cain Velasquez, I went on a long rant a few weeks ago about just how, in the prime of his career from age 27 to 32, the UFC gave him two different humans as opponents. They gave him Junior, then Bigfoot, then Junior, then Bigfoot, then Junior. And that was the prime of Cain's career. He fought two different people. That was a little disappointing. Also, Neil Magny, man, the guy's won 7 fights in a row, and he's not even in the top 10. Come on, I think 7 fights puts him above a lot of champions. Puts him, I think, in the top 5 or the top 3 even of longest current winning streaks going on in the UFC. And the guy's 12th in the welterweight division. I think that's a tip of the cap to that weight class, that you have a lot of amazing fighters there. But I mean, if a guy can rattle off 7 wins, but his level of opponent never gets to the point where he even cracks the top 10, that is a goddamn shame. You look at the 7 wins, Umalatov, Tim Means, which, looking at that, Tim Means might be the most impressive of all 7, and that was number 2. Rodrigo de Lima, Alex Garcia, which, another guy who fought at 189 and looked impressive. I think he effectively retired Mike Swick, William Macario, Kichi Kunimoto, and Hun Gyu Lim, who also is not a slouch at all. Luckily, Magny's going to get Damian Maia very soon at UFC 190. That is a good step up, and they're finally stepping him up now that he's on a 7-fight win streak. But this guy might literally need to piece together 10 wins to get a title shot. And that is absolutely ridiculous. All of them in the UFC, too. It isn't like, this is a 7-fight winning streak that started outside the UFC. It started at UFC 169 against Gassan, which it's wild. That was only about a year and a half ago. The guys fought 7 times. Hats off to guys like Magny, who fight a lot. But when you're not moving him up the ranks, when he gets those wins, what's the point of fighting a lot other than a good check? So yeah, long story short, let's give Thompson the winner of UFC 190's Maia versus Magny scrap.
Oh yeah, I will co-sign on that. That's just the progression you want to make. As you'd alluded to, Magny, he's on that cowboy pace right now, just cashing checks right now, and that would be a good solid test for for Wonder Boy, no matter who it is, I mean, Magny, he's a very tall, rangy 170, and Damian Maia got grappling chops like you wouldn't believe. So, no matter who the winner is in that fight, there's a good test for him there. Um, or I mean, there's just as you talked about the 170-pound division. It's a Shark Tank right now. You could just pull a name from a hat and make an exciting matchup for Wonder Boy.
Yeah, and Magny and Thompson, both guys who seemingly have a very bright future. I'm checking the odds now. Do they have a line? They do not have a line yet for Maia versus Magny, but interested to see who's got the upper hand in Vegas. We'll move right along. It was a wild week. We had 4 cards in 7 days. Mir versus Duffy, that card. We had the main card, the winners being Alan Jouban, Kevin Lee with a rear naked choke over James Moontazri, Manny Gamburian, Holly Holm, and Tony Ferguson, all winning decisions against Scott Jorgensen, Marion Renault, and Josh Thompson, respectively. Don't know how Thompson didn't get finished. I mean, Ferguson won via decision, but there were probably 6 different spots in the fight where he would have finished anyone else. Thompson, a fucking gamer, a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, probably one of the reasons why he didn't get subbed, but man, Ferguson was landing some hard strikes. I don't know if this ends up being his last fight in the UFC. Thompson, in his UFC debut, had that impressive head kick knockout against Nate Diaz, which I remember being a weird fight because Nate Diaz lost on 420. That just does not make any sense. But since then, he's lost 3 in a row to Bendo, Bobby Green, and Tony Ferguson. So I don't know if the UFC is going to cut him or give him another shot. He, I think, spoke about retirement after the controversial split decision loss to Bendo. But yeah, let's really quick talk Mir Duffy. Duffy was the favorite. Mir came in, a lot of analysts saying he looked really out of shape at the weigh-ins at the Valley View Casino Center in San Diego. But Mir was supposed to be the grappler, Duffy the striker. Mir knocked him out in a minute 13. I mean, Mir looked dangerous. Mir looked like his former self, and a guy who all of a sudden I went from kind of hating on a little bit to being like, damn, all right, you're back in the top 10. You're 2 or 3 wins from maybe one last title shot before you bring it into a career that's been fucking amazing. I mean, the guy I feel like has been in the top 10 of the heavies the last decade or more. I mean, shit, his first fight was at UFC 34 back in 2001. He's been in the UFC effectively for 15 years. He's the longest active fighter who's been signed to the UFC. He's been around forever. Yeah, he had that 4-fight losing streak to JDS, Cormier, Barnett, and the Ream. But now, I mean, shit, he's back in the saddle. A KO against Bigfoot Silva, a KO against Todd Duffy. 2015 has been a very good year for Mr. Mir.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I'll tell you, I picked him to beat Bigfoot Silva. I thought that Bigfoot Silva was an opportunity for him to get back on the right track.
Coming off the TRT.
Coming off that TRT, you got a big, plotting, lumbering Antonio Silva who, he's a tactician, but, you have to give Frank Mir the speed advantage in that fight. And you look at that big old Easter Island head that Antonio Silva has. Anyways, your boy P Money got lucky with that one. I did not think that Mir would be able to replicate that with the young Todd Duffy across the corner from him. Now, Todd Duffy has been on the TRT, and we know there is no TRT. Now, I'm not saying that's any kind of issue whatsoever, just as we're noting that. But Frank Mir, my gosh, he came out and he had accredited his boxing training in the post-fight speech. And, maybe he really did learn a few new things, because it really looked like he was rolling with the punches. He was keeping his eyes on Todd Duffy. And he was hanging in the pocket. He was doing good and looking pretty dang sharp out there. I was very pleased to see him. And, he took a couple, but he rolled with them fairly well. And, man, he ended up just friggin' bushwhacking Todd Duffy and just laying him flat sideways. I mean, my goodness, that was just a spectacular knockout, a vintage knockout from Frank Mir. And I really, Frank Mir is one of those guys. I love him in the broadcast booth. As a fighter, at times he's so endearing. At times, his personality kind of grinds your gears, at least. I think Frank Mir, he's fairly talented. He can play the heel or he can play the face very well. But, God bless him. He's a Hall of Famer for sure. I'm glad to see him getting these wins and to get that resurgence going on. It was a great showing from him. And I'll tell you what, I don't know about you, Jake. I had seen an article about Frank Mir saying that he wanted to at some point step into the broadcast booth once again. He called the WEC for a long time. For those of us that remember the WEC, a great portion of those cards, Frank Mir was co-commentating on that, and he was fantastic. I would love to see him get back.
He's one of the best color guys I've heard do a UFC fight. Just the way he's able to talk technically, but not so technically that a fan's not gonna get what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. He's not out kicking the proverbial coverage here. He has a fantastic way, much like a Joe Rogan, who explained to a lot of people exactly what was going on and the finer points of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has that way where he's guiding you through the action and what's happening. But just very good. Can't say enough good things about him. And you know what? If of course, he's probably going to go on, continue to keep fighting, which, God bless him. That's I hope he continues to win and keeps getting those knockouts. Because I like seeing him still have his mental faculties about him. I like seeing him not have the slurred speech, not having lots of pauses and delays. And I mean, I swear to God, I saw an interview with Brad Pickett a couple days after that knockout he suffered to Thomas Almeida, and I swear, talk about one blow that'll take some serious tolls on you, and that blow, I'm telling you, I said, man, I need to go back and rewatch some old Brad Pickett interviews. Did he always talk like this, or what's going on? It's sad, man. So I'd like to see Mir, go out with a couple W's, couple solid KOs, and go back to commentating. Honestly,
yeah, he's really good in that capacity. As far as who next for him, he's now 10th at heavyweight. So there are guys he's fought before around the same area. Obviously Bigfoot, Overeem, Josh Barnett. One guy he hasn't fought who I think would be an interesting matchup, Ben Rothwell, who became one of my favorite heavyweights after a recent win where it was sort of bizarre. He just laughed like a maniac, and I even forget if he called anyone out. It was just so bizarre and so just like him trying to be a heel but being really funny at the same time. I think Ben Rothwell and Frank Mir could really add a lot of interest in whatever card they put him on.
Yeah, that's not a bad fight to make. Ben Rothwell himself, a veteran in the sport, he's been around for a long time, and another guy who's getting that resurgence. I mean, it's so funny right now. You're looking at the UFC's top 10 heavyweights. You got guys like Rothwell, Frank Mir, Andrei Arlovski. Are you serious right now? It's like it's like 04, 05 all over again. I mean, it's fantastic to see these guys coming back, doing their thing, and getting these wins. I think that Mir versus Rothwell would be a good matchup. You could do Mir versus Travis Brown. That's another one. Brown, although who knows if he's even still. The UFC could have potentially suspended him with all the allegations that are.
Yeah, I think the UFC's waiting to see how it plays out. Sort of like the Rumble story. Rumble had some accusations floating around, turned out to either be unfounded or not provable. Either way, he had no legal action brought against him, so the UFC let him fight for a title.
Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see. But I think you could always make that matchup, logistics permitting. Or, of course, the aforementioned Mir Rothwell. That would be a very interesting one to see.
Yeah, and really quick before we move on, it would be remiss to not play that interview with John Anik after his win recently at Fight Night New Orleans.
That choke, let me tell you what that is. That's actions that speak louder than words. And the mixed martial arts you once knew, I am no more. I am something completely different. The only fight that matters to me now is the number one contender spot. I will have the UFC title.
You certainly continue.
I know right now there is not a man in this planet that can stop me inside this octagon, and only politics can slow me. I don't have much left to say other than you have seen nothing yet.
Can I ask you about the fighter, or you want to go?
And the man just walks away. Fucking beautiful. Yeah, Ben Rothwell. Let's break down one final card before we talk a little Fedor, a little Stitch, break down this weekend's card, and maybe a little bit of 190 before we hang it up. I know the one thing I specifically said is this is not going to be a 2 or 3 hour marathon. It's already like an hour 45 in, so probably unable to get around that, but we'll try and make it closer to 2 rather than 3. Bisping Leighty's the card in Scotland. Really quick, the main card broke down like this. Jojo Calderwood defeating Courtney Casey. Pretty one-sided fight. Had one moment where she dropped Casey with a very nice spinning sidekick. Joseph Duffy, the last man to beat your interim champ at 145, Conor McGregor, also Irish, known as Irish Joe. Joseph Duffy defeating Ivan George, another slick sub, just like he did Conor 3 minutes into the first round. And just very quickly went from not going for it to, in a split second, the legs are up around his neck, and the guy's tapping. Duffy gets another win. I don't know if Duffy has the skill to rise up to fight Conor again and get to the elite stratosphere that Conor has gotten to, but if he does, which I'm not saying he can't, I'm just saying I don't see it as likely. If he does, God, the UFC would have a very fun time selling that fight. Duffy Conor 2, the last guy to beat Conor. That would just be great. Co-main event, Evan Dunham back on a win streak after losing to the current champion Dos Anjos, Cerrone, and Barboza. He 2015 got back in the win column against Rodrigo Dam and gets his second win in a row against Ross Pearson. The only fight I want to break down, though, Michael Bisping versus Thales Leighty, an interesting one. I scored 48-48. The judges saw it 47-48, 49-46, 48-47 in favor of Michael Bisping. Most people I follow on Twitter scored it to ladies. I think that crowd noise, like I said with GSP, may have played a role in this as well. Because obviously the crowd in Scotland's going to be going for the Brit rather than the Brazilian. But Mike Bisping back in the back also on a winning streak after beating Dalloway earlier this year, and now ladies, I never know how to say his fucking name. But did you watch ladies? It seemed to be one of those fights where the score is going to vary depending how you judge output compared to power punching, with Bisping getting more strikes out there and landing a little more accurately and a little more often. But as far as the power shots, Dallas was landing more of those. As far as damage, maybe Bisping took more, but if you're looking at it, just looking at a stat sheet of punches thrown and punches landed, he was on the winning side of that. Like I said, I had it 48-48, but Bisping took the split decision win. What did you think about that fight?
Yeah, this is definitely one of those ones where it's so subjective based on, at least as far as we're talking about the scorecard goes, how do you judge a fight? There's a lot of relativity that comes into that. What's important to you in a fight, Jake, may not be as important to me, or vice versa. The way one of us perceives stuffing a takedown, one person may say, hey, the other person's pressing the pace. They are, they have the other person pressed against the cage. They're imposing their will. The other person may say, well, they're preventing a takedown attempt. Even though they're being pressed against the cage, they are nullifying the other person's attack. Thus, they are shutting down their game. So you could almost say that person is winning because they are preventing the tactic. Very much depends on what you're looking at. It was a solid fight, though. A good main event. Not necessarily surprised it went all 5 rounds. I definitely, of course, Michael Bisping, not necessarily known for that finishing power, at least not since his flying knee knockout days over guys like Ross Pointon following Tough 3. And, coming up against a resurgent Talis Lates, latest ladies, hey, ladies, yeah, we're going to have to figure that one out. But he's really been another guy, another vet that's been turning it around as of late as well. It was a good performance from both guys. It's good to see them both performing well either way at the top of the ladder at this point in the game. I probably would give it to latest myself. But hey, I'm not a judge.
Yeah, and as far as matches to make, you look at the middleweights, Bisping now 9th, Dallas 10th. If it came down to who makes the most sense, I think it's 2 different things. Maybe a fight against Anderson would make the most sense because, they've wanted to make the fight for a while, but Silva was always the champ, and Bisping always lost when he was a step away. Maybe a fight against Gegard because they're at that same, 5 to 10 range. But I think the UFC wants him to win again. The UFC knows that Michael Bisping, probably the most popular fighter from the UK, has a mouth on him. They want to see him win. They want to see him get back in the mix to sell seats. And I don't think a fight against Gegard is good if you want a Bisping win, even less a fight against Anderson. Bisping called out Vitor Belfort, but the UFC probably knows that that's not the best call. Another guy he called out, which could work a lot better, Dan Henderson. Bisping, after winning, calls out Vitor and Dan specifically as guys who used to take steroids, which has been one of his crusades for a while. The fact that a lot of the guys he fought were alleged, Reuters. Bisping, Dan, I think is a fight that Michael would want a lot. I think he sees that logo that Dan now uses of him leaping in the air to deliver one final blow at UFC 100. If the timing worked out better, I think the UFC would want to sit on this fight for a while and maybe make it so the first fight is at UFC 100, the second fight is at UFC 200. But just the fact that both of them are getting older, I don't think you really want to sit on either guy and just let time idly pass. So let's book Hendo and Bisping for maybe late 2015, early 2016. I think that would be a fun fight.
Yeah, you know what? And for a while there, I was thinking that was a rematch that Michael Bisping did not want. But he went and he called out Henderson and he called out Vitor. And I had never really thought about that. You know, these matches, his number one title contender matches, all three of them, he lost two guys that were on testosterone replacement therapy. Very interesting. Now, you know, performance-enhancing drugs don't always make a difference in a fight. We saw that in several fights where, Ali Bagautinov versus Demetrius Johnson for the flyweight championship. He got taken to school by Demetrius, basically embarrassed from my recollection, and ends up pissing hot at the end of the fight. You know, so do PEDs always influence a fight? Not necessarily. I sincerely doubt. Puncher King Bagautinov, I sincerely doubt his intention was to lose that fight. So, they don't always make a difference. But it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out over the next year, just with all the drug testing that the UFC's finally doing these days, that they have the resources to do now. It's really going to be interesting to see. Are we going to see maybe certain fighters not perform as well? Maybe certain fighters starting to perform a little better now that the playing field is quote unquote even. Will it even make a difference? I mean, hey, I'm sure there's going to be people and there's going to be ways. There's always ways for people to cheat. Doesn't matter what you're talking about. If you're talking about sports, if you're talking about politics, whatever it may be. But hey, at least you're making it more difficult, and you're trying as hard as you can to level that playing field there. So, let's continue to see whose stock rises and whose falls over the next year, or maybe 2 years. But yeah, since Bisping wants to get those fights back, I mean, hey, it definitely makes sense when you look at it from that perspective. So, hey, either Vitor or Dan Henderson, I think logically and ranking wise, those are good routes to go.
And we will move swiftly on to the news. So swiftly, we won't even play the news theme. A couple topics I want to touch on. The first one being Fedor apparently coming out of retirement to fight again, and recently news releasing that he might actually join the UFC. When I first heard it, I thought that Bellator just easily made the most sense. He has that relationship with Scott Coker. It would sort of be the exact same arrangement he had when he fought in the Strikeforce. You know, the UFC, more specifically Dana White and Vadim Finkelstein, won't get along, so he just fights and makes a lot of money and stacks up some wins in the second best MMA organization in the world. Apparently, talks have been making progress with Fedor and the UFC. So the one sort of hang-up spot why Fedor was never in the UFC in the past was that they demanded promotion with M1, a company that Fedor owns a pretty sizable stake in. M1 would not be a part of this, so he's finally agreeing to fight in a fight league that is exclusively the UFC. It's not, the UFC and M1 puts on this which is good. That's a giant step. I'm still thinking he probably ends up with Bellator because they probably want a ludicrous amount of money. And you know the UFC's stance on Fedor, especially after those losses. They were basically calling him a can, saying he was at bum status, this and that. I don't know if they're going to be able to find a middle ground. I just have a feeling that Fedor wants a lot of money, and it's probably money that Dana isn't willing to pay and Scott Coker is. And I'm thinking we see Fedor and Bellator maybe early 2016. Things like this, it seems to be a slow burn. He would need to get back in shape and get in camp and iron out all the details with Bellator and find an opponent, and they would obviously need time to hype up him coming back to the sport and being in a fight. So I don't see him fighting until early 2016. Would fucking love to see him join the UFC. I mean, think about the potential fights, Mir versus Fedor, UFC lifer against a, all-time great. What about another match between Andrei Arlovsky and Fedor? That would be fun as hell. Put the new breed of heavyweight Stipe Miocic against the old breed and Fedor. Maybe another fight against one of the Nog brothers, especially if Big Nog gets a win here at UFC 190. Just so many fun fights I would love to see put on with Fedor. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could find a UFC fan who doesn't want to see Fedor joining up with, hate the UFC all you want. I do plenty, and I get a lot of heat for it. It is unquestionably the number one organization in the sport, and Fedor finally getting a UFC fight under his belt would be historic.
Yeah, that's real talk. That's something, I'm pretty sure every fan by now has wanted, and there's that possibility, but it's one of those things where it's just, until I see it, there's no way I'm going to believe it until he's walking to that ring. That's been the rumor for so long now, and even back in the day, after the Zuffa buyout of Pride, what did he do? He went over to Strikeforce. So he has a history of working with Coker. And now Coker's with Bellator. Bellator is owned by Viacom. Viacom has deep, deep, deep cable money. They got all the money. So if you're talking about just chucking money at commodities, that's something they're good for. So the possibility, like you, Jake, I'd say it's very high he's going to Bellator. They do have some guys that, they could potentially throw his way. Of course, not like the UFC. We all want to see those fights. Who wouldn't want to see Cro Cop fight Fedor again? Speaking of greatest fights of all time, man, Cro Cop versus Fedor.
That would be so fun. I don't know why I didn't think to mention that one. My God.
For real. Cro Cop's winning fights again. Cro Cop is back in the UFC and winning fights again. It's 2015. Of course, that fight had to be a decade ago. That had to be 2005. But there's, of course, how do you do that fight a decade later? But Jesus, there's so many options out there. And, Fedor, he's just always been one of those ones where he's had the well-rounded skill set. He was like, I'd say a heavyweight Chuck Liddell, if you will, just the super strong boxing, fantastic hands and power, and that Sambo background. He's got some great grappling chops. So he's always been the complete package since back in the day, and I'd still love to see how he stacks up. As we were talking about before, guys like Mir, Rothwell, Andrei Arlovsky, who Fedor has that knockout win over. These are top-ranked guys in the UFC right now. So, man, let's do it. That'd be fantastic to see. I'm just not getting my hopes up right now, though.
Yeah, we've got a holdout. I would be super pumped about him joining the UFC, but like I said, still expect it to be Bellator. One last bit of news before we break down a couple cards and get the fuck out of here. Stitch gets fired from the UFC after saying some negative things about the Reebok deal, saying that he's going to be losing a lot of money. We talked a lot about the fighters losing sponsors and losing a lot of sponsorship money for the Reebok deal, which, every bit of the Reebok deal is ridiculous. Like, Reebok got a deal of the century to sponsor the entire UFC for less than a lot of teams get paid for sponsorship. I can't really blame Reebok themselves here in the slightest, because if, I really think the UFC could have gotten a lot more money, and Reebok just got the deal of the century and is going to get away the next few years with paying the UFC, I think, a lot less than these sponsorships are worth. And not only that, but, from what I've heard, Dana and Lorenzo are getting half of the fighter sponsorship money. They are all right. They've done a lot for the sport, and I have, a lot of folks saying, "Oh, you really hate Dana. You really hate the UFC," and it's not even like that, because I would love to shake hands with Dana or Frank or Lorenzo and thank them for all the things they've done for the sport. Without them, mixed martial arts wouldn't be close to where it is now. And in the long run, they've done a lot. Just the last year, I've just got to question, this Reebok deal, which, I'm obviously not the only one talking about it. You have fighters lashing out. You have Cutman lashing out. And we usually talked about the fighters losing sponsorships. But now that you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, the Cutmen used to always wear patches of different, Affliction, I don't know, different companies who sponsored them. And now the UFC's like, nope, you're just going to wear this Reebok shirt and that's it. And Stitch mainly does fights for the UFC, and he also does fights for the Klitschko brothers. Both of whom, their careers starting to wrap up, come to an end. So if you're Stitch, you're obviously like, wow, my 3 big sources of income are all welling up, and I can't really blame the Klitschkos for getting older, but I can be frustrated at the UFC for telling me now that I can't, come in with sponsors that I worked out deals with, this and that, and the UFC wants to talk about tackiness. I've always thought the 20 ads on the canvas floor of the mat were way more tacky than, shorts, fighter shorts, or the shirts that Cutmen wear. So Stitch went on a little rant on Twitter, was retweeting a lot of folks who were also against the Reebok deal. And the UFC just cuts him, just like that, sort of a la Burt Watson. They take a guy who's been around the UFC over a decade, maybe going on 20 years. Going really back to the genesis of the organization, the genesis of the sport, a guy who's been around forever, and they just cut him like it's nothing, just flippant. All right, you're fun gone. And it seems obvious to me that the reason they can just cut Stitch and they don't cut a guy like Schaub or Jury who speaks out. Schaub and Jury are still cash cows. They can still milk a little money out of those others. Stitch, the way the UFC sees it, it's just like, oh well, we can just find a new cut guy, which, for the fighter's sake, I hope it's that easy, because finding a good cut person is probably a lot more difficult than it sounds like. You had Stitch working the Robbie versus Rory fight. If you have an inexperienced cut person in there, maybe the fight doesn't go to a 5th round. Maybe a wound gets so bad that the doctor has to stop it after 4, and maybe we just don't know what happens. Maybe Rory ends up winning the fight and Robbie doesn't even get a rematch because it's like, well, he beat him the fuck up the 3rd and 4th round. That was basically a finish. It's not the fact, maybe Stitch should have gotten a harsh phone call from Dana saying, dude, Stitch, you can't be doing this. You can't be speaking out against the UFC, and if you keep doing it, we might have an issue. But just cutting a guy, just so flippantly letting a guy go, just like Burt, whatever, this, I don't know, man. It's making my opinion of the administration of the UFC just drop more and more, which I hate. I look for reasons to like them, to back them, because I do a fucking show. This is the 132nd MMA show I've done where we talk 90% about the UFC. I love to talk about their fights and promote the fights, and I want to be behind the folks who are running it. But when they're doing just low down, just dirtbag shit like this, it really pisses me off. Stitch is an awesome dude. I hope he finds in employment elsewhere. You should go buy his book on Amazon to help him out. But I don't know. It just really fucking pisses me off.
Well, Jake, I find, this situation, it's one of those things where it's hard for me to really sympathize with Stitch. I can certainly empathize with him, but he essentially went out into a public forum and said, hello, my name is so-and-so, I work for this company, and this is what my company is doing, and I think it's stupid. And pretty much any company you work for, if you kind of go out there, especially in such a public forum, doing an interview like that, that's getting picked up by the media, and you're a current employee, and it's not exactly, this isn't a whistleblower type thing where he would be exempt from it. This is, this is publicly known. This is, this is company policy. This has been announced. It's not like he's, blowing the lid off of anything. This is just, he's openly saying, I don't like what my company's doing. Well, hey, if I were to get on Instagram and say, fuck my boss, you know what? I'd probably be fired the next day too. That wasn't exactly what happened with Stitch, of course. And do I agree with him? Yeah, 100%. The Reebok deal is garbage. I have, friends that work for companies that would sponsor some of these UFC fighters, and for what they would have to pay for some of these, small little logos, we're not even talking prime ass real estate. We're talking, like behind the kneecap, logo real estate. You're probably talking for one of those logos, probably the same amount of money that they'd be making from the Reebok deal altogether. So they're really taking a huge amount of money from the fighters. I'm sure it's probably a great chunk from the cut men as well. It's got to be significant anyways. Surely they're not getting as much camera time as a fighter, but either way you slice it, that's income you're taking away. That's, food you're taking off of people's plates. And, that really does seem to be just serving the company that doesn't really seem to be hurting for profits. They're still a profitable company, even if, you want to talk about their ratings trending downward or whatever it might be. As of late, things are looking good. It looks like things are back on the upswing. And especially now, it looks like they're building some new stars there. There was a while there where all the Tough One guys were retiring. Your GSPs are going away. Anderson Silva, this, that, and the other. It's like, man, we don't have any stars. Guess what? Now, things are looking bright. UFC's looking good. You got all kinds. You got Conor McGregor. You got Joanna Jędrzejczyk. You got Ronda Rousey, of course. There's so many great fighters these days holding the title, and things are doing good in the profit margin wise. You don't need to be making deals like that are hurting the fighters that are your commodities. I would love to see. I mean, if anybody really wants to make any kind of change, I mean, really the only thing you can do is just say, hey, you know what? Just boycott the UFC. Boycott the UFC, have all the fighters run to Bellator, and hey, guess what? You know, I mean, Bellator, they're on Spike TV. That's where UFC came into its own. That's where the UFC Phoenix rose from the ashes, was on Spike TV, and became or returned to be the sport that we know and love today. So it's already there, just waiting. There is an outlet for the top fighters in the world to go to. There's multiple promotions, so it's just I can really see both sides of this. Again, you know, you don't want to go out there and badmouth your employer. That's just not a smart move. But you know, the UFC, they really should be looking out for their guys a little bit more. They need to be helping them, especially financially. Now more than ever, they're doing pretty good on the money these days.
Yeah, and here's hoping that Stitch is able to find gainful employment elsewhere. Let's break down this weekend's card. Talk a little bit about Rousey Kohea, because I'm not sure if we're going to be around next week, and then sign off. UFC on Fox, Dillashaw versus Barao. It's going to be this weekend at the United Center in Chicago. The prelims and the main card will both be on Fox. The main card kicking off at 8 p.m. on the East, 5 p.m. on the West. Are you going to be able to catch this card, or do you got to work?
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm going to be catching this card. I'm quite ready.
Let's break down the main card as we usually do. A few prelims that stand out. Friend of the show, Darren Cruikshank, taking on James Krause. Zach Cummings taking on Dominique Steele, which straight up sounds like a porno name or a name off like American Gladiators or something. Dominique Steele. Eddie Wineland, another friend of the show, against Brian Caraway. A very fun fight between Jim Miller and Danny Castillo. Killa B, Ben Saunders versus Kenny Robertson. Jean Vellante against another friend of the show, Tom Lawler, who is a co-host on the Filthy FRB show. Definitely visit frbshow.com. Check out the links for that show on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud. They just had Fightnomics, Reed Kuhn on, and yours truly is the producer of the FRB show. But let's break down the main card. The first one, a fight that both guys have been around for so long. I was like, I swear this is a rematch, but it's actually not. These guys have never fought. Takanori Gomi and Joe Lauzon. Joe being the favorite in Vegas, pretty sizably, minus 350 against Takanori's plus 290. Gomi, a guy who's been known as a power puncher, seemed unstoppable in Pride, was finishing fucking everyone. Seems to have slowed down a little bit since rejoining the UFC. Is 4-4, 1-2 in his last 3, losing a split decision to Diego Sanchez, winning a decision against Isaac Valley Flag, and then getting TKO'd by Miles Jury last September. Joe Lauzon also been a little rocky of late, 2-3 in his last 5 losses to Jim Miller and Michael Johnson. Then he got back in the win column against Danzig, who both guys have beaten recently. Danzig beat Michael Chiesa, which, if memory serves me correctly, was a fight that was pretty favored toward Chiesa, and Joe wins it via a doctor's stoppage, only to lose to Ally Quina via TKO early this year at UFC 183. I think Joe's going to be smarter than to keep it standing, and I think he has the tools to bring it to the mat, and once it goes there, I think we see a much better grappler in Joe Lauzon, who is able to at least win two rounds via top control and just managing the fight on the mat. Maybe he gets a sub. We haven't seen Joe Lauzon score a sub in a few years, and this might be the one to do it. I mean, shit, Takanori Gomi. I think 4 of his last 6 losses have come via submission. So maybe we see Joe with another finish here on the mat. How do you see Joe Lauzon versus Takanori Gomi playing out on the first fight on Saturday's main card?
Gomi versus Lauzon. That's one I've been eyeballing recently. I've been smelling it. Yeah, son. Oh man, I wouldn't mind a Jessica eyeball that. I'm sorry, I digress. No, but Gomi versus Lauzon. Gomi, I'm smelling upset here. I don't know what it is. I feel like Gomi, he's still just got solid boxing. He's got power. That's one thing, that never goes. The power is still always there. And we've seen Joe, again, in his very last fight, lose by TKO. So, as we know, in the UFC, all it takes is one. And Gomi, he's just really got some crisp boxing. But Lauzon is a favorite for a reason. I mean, he's going to have good height and reach. If he can fight long, he could potentially put in, let's say, like a Nate Diaz-style performance, maybe drop him with a jab or something like that, drop him with a couple long straight shots and then follow up with a sub or something like that. I could easily see that being the case. I mean, I love both fighters. I'd love to see Gomi do it just because I've always been a big fan of the old Fireball Kid. Smart money's definitely on Lauzon in this one, but I think it might just be the heart telling me Gomi has a real good shot in this. I'd like to see him take it.
Takanori Gomi, we're finally disagreeing on some shit here. Let's move on. Edson Barboza against Paul Felder. Barboza 2-2 in his last 4, was finished by Donald Cerrone, got wins against Evan Dunham and a unanimous decision against Bobby Green, and then Michael Johnson, a fight where Barboza just looked out of sorts. Johnson looked faster, was able to control the fight this past February. And Barboza being the favorite, I think it was in Brazil, so that would have made sense. Loses the fight to Michael Johnson. Taking on Paul Felder, the Irish Dragon, even though he's from Philly. A lot of guys are really big on this guy just for being so well-rounded. Trains at Henzo's, a blue belt in BJJ, a black belt in karate, a second-degree black belt in taekwondo. Finishes most of his fights via KO or TKO. The last one, a real nice spinning back fist at UFC 182. I was lucky enough to be present for against Danny Castillo. A lot of folks big on Felder, which I think is why it's gotten so close. I think Barboza started out as a very sizable favorite. Since then, a lot of money has come in on Paul Felder, whose line has moved from, I think, around plus 200 to around plus 130. And even though, you usually want to think follow the money and go for the guy who the money is pouring in on, I think this is going to be a very tough test for Felder. Edson Barboza is going to be looking to rally back after losing to Michael Johnson, and I think we see more of the Barboza that fought Bobby Green. Uses that speed to keep distance, land leg kicks. But fuck, dude, Felder's got power, and he's not a guy you've heard about a lot. If he scores the fight or wins the fight via KO. I would not be shocked at all. I think this is one of those fights where if there's a finish, I think it's a Felder KO. But if it goes all 3 rounds, I think it's Barboza staying on the outside, using his speed, using those leg kicks, and winning a judge's decision. What about you, Pat?
Well, I think you just said the phrase that pays there, Jake, and that is leg kicks. Barbosa has them, and they're crippling. And for a guy who definitely has that karate and taekwondo background like Felder, that could spell problems. Edson Barbosa, he's just vicious on the feet, as is Felder. Felder, he's got great technique and great power. It's not too surprising that the lines have closed up, getting closer to the fight as we are. But at this point, I think you said it correctly. If there's a finish, it's more likely for Felder to get the finish. Although who knows, if Edson Barbosa is able to chop away enough on Felder, I could see him getting a TKO due to leg kicks or something like that. Potentially a knockout of his own. It's going to be a war, though, that's for sure. I definitely see this one being a very high-level striking contest. And it's just going to be fun to see. This UFC on Fox card is just looking crazy stacked.
And moving up the card to the co-main event, Miesha Tate and Jessica Ai. I pick favorites a lot, sort of unabashedly. They're the favorite for a reason in Vegas. Miesha minus 200, Jessica Ai plus 170. I think I'm going for the dog here again. Miesha Tate, what should happen is I think the wrestling is good enough to where Tate has the advantage. Jessica Ai only lost 1 fight in her career, two, sorry, but one was like way early, so far back you almost don't want to count it. Since joining the UFC, she beat Sarah Kaufman, lost a split decision to Alexis Davis, then beat Leslie Smith via TKO. She's one of the few women in the UFC, along with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, who, they can very easily stop a fight with strikes. She's got power punches, and finished it with a doctor stoppage. This is tough because if Miesha Tate uses that Alexis Davis game plan and does what she does, I think her wrestling is a little bit better than Alexis Davis. She can probably win the fight. But the one thing that's making me lean toward I is the fact that I've heard Miesha Tate talk more about Ronda Rousey than her actual opponent in the lead up. And, whether it's her being asked about another title or just being asked about her weigh-in. I think I was watching the UFC Embedded, and her coach was talking about weight cuts and this and that. And Misha's like, weight cuts are really tough. I'm just naturally not much of a sweater. It's hard for me to sweat out the weight. Unlike Ronda, who sweats like a little piggy. And it's just like, shut the fuck up. Like, you got your ass handed to you twice by Ronda Rousey. And it's just so catty. And it really makes me think, damn, she is more worried about a third shot against Ronda than she is her first fight against Jessica Ai. And that just spells out trouble. I know Miesha is the favorite, probably should be the favorite. Ai has power. Yeah, she didn't finish Leslie Smith with a power shot. It was a doctor stoppage. But, I've seen her rock her opponent multiple times. And if Miesha goes in there and is thinking about Ronda Rousey and gets her bell rung, what's going to keep her in the fight when her head wasn't in that fight to begin with? If if I had to put cash on it, yeah, Misha wrestling, probably decision 29-28 Misha. But man, you really got to be careful at this level of a sport where all it takes is 1 second and the fight's over.
Yeah, that's always. I mean, there's always that puncher's chance, and especially with Jessica Ai. She's got those vicious elbows, like the ones that just exploded Leslie Smith's ear. That was just a grotesque showing, and she loves going to those elbows. It's really nice how she incorporates those. She's got good boxing, but man, Amisha Tate, she is just, for my money, she is the second best grappler in the UFC women's bantamweight division, behind only Ronda Rousey. We saw from her fight with Sarah McMahon, who's an Olympic silver medalist wrestler, she handily outgrappled her. I mean, of course, if it were a straight up wrestling match, sure, we'd probably give that to Sarah McMahon. But talking about jiu-jitsu grappling and submission grappling, we saw that Tate really has a complete package. She's been doing it for much longer than McMahon and many of these girls. She's a fantastic grappler, and again, in my mind, second only to Ronda Rousey. And apparently, she has that preoccupation with Rousey. That's just, who knows? I think that's the measuring stick for the women's bantamweight division. And Misha probably has a little more personal issue going there, especially with the two contests that she lost so handily. So I believe she's always just going to be comparing herself to Ronda Rousey. But I think she's probably just going to wrap Jessica Ai up. I don't know that Jessica Ai has a whole lot for her in the grappling department. Just Misha Tate is on another level in that respect. She is very good with her grappling, and I mean, I love Jessica Ai. I would love for nothing more. Misha Tate is not my favorite personality in the UFC by any stretch of the imagination. I love seeing her get her clock cleaned, and I would love for nothing more than to see Jessica Ai do that come this Saturday. But I have a feeling Misha Tate is just going to be all over her.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like. The Vegas handicappers are leaning toward Tate using that grappling, which I don't disagree. I think Tate probably is the second best grappler at women's bantamweight, which is insane when you think about how Ronda Rousey just completely dominated her. Every time she shot in, Rousey not only defended it, but she reversed them all into just gnarly judo takedowns where Tate ends up being on the bottom. Ronda in a league of her own. Let's break down Dillashaw Barao, then let's break down Ronda versus Bitch, and then let's get out of here. TJ Dillashaw versus Renan Barao, going for the UFC's men's bantamweight champion. And then we'll break down the women's bantamweight championship. Dillashaw Barao, we're finally seeing the rematch. It's been scheduled 2 or 3 times only to fall through, including the time Dillashaw's last fight nearly a year ago, UFC 177 against Joe Soto, where Barao literally backs out the day before the fight because he slips and bonks his head and passes out because he was trying to cut so much weight back in August. Dillashaw, I wish we could have seen him fight someone other than Joe Soto since winning the belt over a year ago. Soto, maybe a bright prospect, but for sure was not ready. And I mean, still, man, Soto offered Dillashaw a lot more than most expected. So Barao coming back in, having all this time to train. I would not be shocked if Barao storms in and gets back to being the pound-for-pound juggernaut that we saw he was, beating Faber, McDonald, Pickett, Wineland, Jorgensen, Faber again, just mashing up everyone before losing to Dillashaw. The one reason I think TJ wins, though, is you saw him just get so much better between the Viana fight, then losing to Asunciao, then the Easton fight, he looked even better. The Barao fight, he looked even better. I think we're going to see a Dillashaw who's firing on all cylinders again, like he was at UFC 173, and just using those angles, which is what his win, his first win against Barao was all about. Hennon just couldn't figure out the angles and the technique. And, Barao being a speed and power guy, yeah, he does have some technique, but no one came at him with the kickboxing that Dillashaw used. I think Dwayne Ludwig is maybe the best striking coach in the sport currently. Him, guys like Matt Hume, Greg Jackson, they're in a league of their own as far as being just world-class trainers, getting guys ready for a fight. Long story short, I think we see Dillashaw retain the belt in this one.
Well, that's a bold prediction, Jake. I could definitely see it going that way. Dillashaw shocked everybody with that performance. The underdog that he was going into that was so massive. This was a guy who was knocked out not by the flyweight champion, but by the guy who's ranked number 2 or number 3 in the flyweight division. So going into that Barao fight, he was very heavy underdog, but man, he showed a great game plan, and as you alluded to, the movement really was the key. He stepped it up and is taking it to a different level that a lot of fighters just aren't with right now, with the movement, head movement, angles, and all that type of footwork. They're not just getting there. And TJ Dillashaw finally got to that level, that kind of Dominic Cruz style of game. And if he can replicate his performance, I think he could very easily. Well, if he can replicate his performance, he can replicate his performance. No, he definitely has a great shot at doing the same thing that he did to Barao the first time. Barao, he does have the added opportunity of, Jake, as you mentioned, it's been some time since their first fight happened now. So he's had time to look back at that fight, and his coaches have had time to look at that fight and analyze what Dillashaw was doing. So they've had an extra year to study this, whereas before, this was basically just an unknown element. Dillashaw was continually showing improved striking. And, of course, he always had some wrestling and grappling chops, but the footwork and the movement really just that perfect storm hit when he fought Renan Barao. And they've had some time to study it now. So this is going to be a crazy match to watch. I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm so pumped for this. And, man, I feel like I'm picking Barao again in this one. I don't know why. I feel like I should say Dillashaw is going to do it. He's going to replicate his performance, but something is just telling me I think Barao has had that time to study. I think, and you know what, perhaps that Dillashaw was such a huge underdog. Maybe Barao himself was buying into his own hype and was, like most of us, wasn't giving Dillashaw any kind of chance. So I'm sure he's going to be taking Dillashaw as serious as a heart attack right now, and he's had that time to study. So I'm thinking it's going to be Anu, and once again, Renan Barao, bantamweight champion.
Yeah, and man, if I was in Vegas, of course, where it's legal, and I had to put a little money down, I might just put a little bit of action on Barao, because you bet on Barao, you triple your money, man. Plus 200 is not a bad line for a former pound-for-pound juggernaut who only lost one fight. Real quickly, because I think we're not going to be doing a show next week, Going to be very busy getting a moving truck on Monday or Tuesday and packing it up and then leaving to go drive across the damn USA. I think we'll be back first week of August, but that leaves UFC 190. A lot of fun fights on UFC 190. We got Big Nog taking on Stefan Struve, Little Nog taking on Shogun Rua, Bigfoot versus the Hulk Pelele. The two best women's strawweights in the world, in my eyes, sans Joanna Jędrzejczyk in Claudia Gadelha taking on Jessica Aguilar, a fight between Damian Maia and Neil Magny we alluded to. That'll for sure be a fight that I think I planned it out. I think that night I'll be in a hotel room in Little Rock, Arkansas or something. But Ronda Rousey versus Bitch Correia. Let's break down the main card before we end this, what turned out to be a marathon of a podcast, like I promised it wouldn't be. Which I feel like every time I promise it's not going to be a marathon, it ends up being a marathon.
Every goddamn time.
Bitch Correia doesn't have a chance against Ronda Rousey. She is not a bad fighter, but she of Ronda Rousey's title defenses since being awarded the UFC title before UFC 157. We now have Carmouche, Tate, McMahon, Davis, Zingano, and now Bitch Correia, which I'm not calling her a bitch. Her name is Bethe, which in Portuguese is pronounced betch, which bitch. I'm basically saying the same thing each time. Betch just I don't see how she's gonna beat Ronda Rousey. She doesn't have a chance, I don't think. She's a big striker. We've seen a lot of tough strikers. I think Kat Zingano, striking wise, offered a lot more danger, and Zingano got armbarred in 14 seconds. Davis was a great wrestler. She got KO'd in 16. Ronda's just the most dominant fighter maybe we've ever seen in the UFC. And in my opinion, Correia is the least... presents the least danger than any of the 6 women who have fought her. So, this is going to be... I don't know, I think, Ronda has said... for all the shit-talking bitch has done about her dad, saying, oh, Ronda's going to want to kill herself when the fight's over, basically alluding to the fact that her dad killed herself when she was a kid, then all of a sudden backtrack. We all know what the fuck you were saying, bitch. I think Ronda, she said she wants to make it a memorable win to show future opponents not to talk all this shit, and I think we see an arm snap. I think... I'm gonna call 11 seconds and we see an arm snap, or maybe 21 seconds and an arm snap. Just I think Rousey usually yanks it some, gives the girl a chance to tap, and if she doesn't, she'll snap it, a la Julia Budd. But I think Correia walks out of the HSBC arena with a sling on in this fight. Pat?
Well, and it's funny, we were just talking about fights with gigantic favorites and huge underdogs, and that is certainly no different in this fight. I mean, the line on this is just staggering. I would not touch it with a 10-foot pole, but if Betch Correia were to win, that would be just as shocking as an upset as Dillashaw over Burrell, probably even more so. I see it the same way as you are seeing it, Jake. Ronda Rousey is just better everywhere. She's a better striker, for God's sakes. I mean, we weren't even saying that about Ronda Rousey. I would say she's a better striker than Betch Correia. Better grappling, better judo. I mean, it's just she is a better mixed martial artist. She is a superior level of athlete overall. The Olympic caliber of athlete. She is on another level. That's just really it. Betch Correia does not have a chance in winning this fight unless she dies, comes back as a different person, and trains her entire life to beat Ronda Rousey. And even then, she probably won't be able to do that. At this point, she just gives up too much of a deficit against Ronda Rousey, who's just a beast, who is meant to decimate other women in combat. and she's been trained to do so her entire life. And she's proved nearly impossible to stop, except for, two other people in the world who ranked higher than her in Olympic level judo. So, yeah, Betch Kohea, she will most certainly experience pain this Saturday night, or 2 Saturdays from now. I apologize.
Yeah. August 1st, I believe. Yeah, if Betch Kohea wins, it would be the biggest upset in the history of the sport. If it got out of the first round, it would be wild. I don't expect it to go longer than 30 seconds. And I guess that wraps up this marathon of a podcast. Really quickly, I know your battery is dying or dead or close to being dead. Any shout-outs or last words of encouragement for the listeners from the legendary P Money?
Oh, yes, indeed, Jake. Well, thank you for having me. It's been beautiful. Love being on the MMA podcast with all the family, the MMA mental family, the Word on the Street family. Follow your boy P Money at Sweet Pappy Jones. That's everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you want. Follow your boy at Sweet Pappy Jones. Follow the whole MMA podcast family.
Yeah, speaking of the family, the shout-outs might get a little old, but I gotta fit them in. Of course, the original host, our boy Chris Lowe at C. Lowenstein, Ross Finkelstein, E before the L. If we're talking about Steens, of course, Ramses, dude. I'm glad you're feeling better in the Lone Star State. We hope to have you back on soon. Our boy Kevin Black, Mystery Meds, who else? Fucking The Enthusiast, Alan Yao, Hunter. We talked about it at UFC 189. Start saving up now. We're gonna try and get the whole fucking crew out to UFC 200 in Vegas, July 2nd at the new arena they're building. It isn't even open yet. Let's fucking do it. All of us just go to Vegas, get a big group, fucking eat a bunch of wings, and drink a bunch of beer at the Hooters, go to the UFC Expo, meet a bunch of fighters, and just have a fun-ass weekend. I'm going to try my damnedest to be back in Vegas for UFC 200. Aside from that, like I said, next week we probably won't be back. We'll probably be back the first week of August. And really quick, I did want to dedicate this episode of the MMA podcast to our buddy Josh Hall at Hot Wheels 99. The guy had an indomitable spirit, was super funny, always had a really cheery outlook, and was taken far too soon. Josh, rest in peace, buddy. We hope we hope you're up there listening, and this show goes out to you. Until the first week of August, once again, thank you for listening, all the positive support we get on Twitter, iTunes, YouTube. It's all fucking great. Next month, plan to have some interviews, some really good ones too, with Nate Corey. Maybe get Joe Schilling on in an interview that's sort of fallen through a couple times, but we look to finally make. It's going to be a good month, August. Like I said, it'll finally be settled down a little bit. Look to get back on the schedule of doing them every week. Sorry about not doing one next week, but you got 2 awesome-ass UFC cards to look forward to in the Chicago Fox card in UFC 190. So until the first week of August, we love the shit out of you, and we gone.
Shout out Jake. Tune into the MMA podcast every Tuesday night.
Act the wild style, always been a foul child. Realize, sucker, I be the coming like Noah.
The MMA podcast, Jake is the host. And since Ramsey's been in the wheelchair, the Aunt Jimmy show has been on a roll. I wanna say John Jones is a host, so I think that I'll pick up the phone and dial 213-457-3380. We got hot takes on the stove. You get blood on your clothes if you're sitting in the front row. I throw on my gi and then I lace the hoops. I'll have Yao lying down cause he ain't the truth. And if Alan wasn't a cop, I'd mention you. And shout out to Ross Finkelstein the Jew. Cause according to you, you're an MMA guru. Approved Bisbing lost his hands count Dooku. If you're a fancy boy, you get a 2-minute slot. Mystery wants a title shot. So listen to the MMA podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I'm on the strap. But you know that I'll never tap. So listen to the MMA podcast. Throw a high kick, but I block that. Call me Diaz, screaming George, where you at? I want the strap. And you know that I won't tap. Mystery. The MMA podcast. Most of us just live and breathe this fighting shit. Shut up, Jake. Shut up, Jake.